passes.
All right, I'll call this meeting to order. Standing Committee of the Whole for November 14th, 2023. Attendance at the start of the meeting, Natalie said she would be joining us a little bit late. Councillor Hughes is at home, not feeling well, but I'm glad you're here. Everyone else is present in
Cheerful?
CP.
Cheerful?
Cheerful? Did I say cheerful?
Yeah.
I hope everyone's cheerful.
Fearful? Fearful?
Now, Councillor Broadhead, would you like to make a motion to adopt the agenda?
Yeah. Most pleased to do that. It's so cheerful.
That the November 14th, 2023 agenda be adopted as presented.
Oh, let me change mine.
That's carried.
Carefully carried.
No registered appointments? Okay. So we will go to the minutes from October 10th. Anyone see any errors or omissions? Seeing none, can I have a motion?
That the planning committee of the whole meeting minutes of October 10, 2023 be adopted as cheerfully presented.
All right, all those in favor? Doctor is carried unanimously. All right, going straight into the good stuff. And Aaron is already front and center. Are you doing the presentation? Okay, take it away whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Share my screen here. Okay, ready to go. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about automated enforcement. I'm going to go through just a brief presentation. A lot of it just highlights some sections that have already been provided in the background report that council has, that committee has, sorry. So for today's presentation, we'll go through the purpose of today's presentation, a little bit of ATE history, background in St. Albert. We'll go through some key statistics on automated enforcement. I'll talk a little bit about the impacts of the new mandatory automated enforcement guidelines, outline the service delivery options, and then administration's recommendation, and then opportunity for questions. Obviously, if there's any questions while I'm going through the presentation, feel free to interrupt and we can answer as we go. So for today's presentation, really, we're here to provide information on the automated traffic enforcement services in St. Albert, and then seek further direction from the committee as a result of the impact of the Government of Alberta automated enforcement guidelines, as well as the fact that our existing service contract is coming to an end in May of next year. A little bit of history of automated enforcement in St. Albert. It was introduced in 2001. We started off with 2 red light cameras and 2 mobile enforcement units. Speed on green was then permitted by the province in 2008, and then we shortly turned it on right after that. By 2012, we added a third red light camera, as well as CAN cameras. Those are the little portable devices that got used in areas where vehicles couldn't park. In 2013, administration, as we were approaching the end of the contract at that time, we did an in-house versus contract service administrative review at that time. And the outcome of that review was that contracted services was the desired approach forward. As a result, we did an RFP, and Global Traffic Services was awarded the contract through a competitive bid process in 2014. The contract was subsequently reviewed in 2019 and expires in May of next year. In 2019, the Government of Alberta started a comprehensive review on automated traffic enforcement, and they also put a freeze on municipalities and police services from installing new traffic equipment, as well as adding any new zones. 2021, the Government of Alberta completed their review, and they introduced more rigorous guidelines as a result of their findings. Changes that they had implemented were in a phased approach, with the final change being implemented of May of this year. From 2021 to 2023, the service contract that we had with our global services, we had reduced it over time. And as of today, it's down to 6,850 hours. And a lot of that had to do with trending that we were seeing in the community as far as violations, as well as the impacts of what the guidelines were having. It had an impact on the number of hours that we could provide. As of today, there is still a freeze on automated enforcement services in terms of adding any new sites or changing out any equipment. And that is supposed to end November 31st. We still haven't heard from the government if that is actually going to happen. They've expanded that or extended that freeze twice now. So in the coming days, I would expect something from the government of Alberta on that freeze. Over the years, we've been audited 3 times by the government of Alberta, and that's a standard audit that happens with anyone who is providing these services and program. And in all 3 audits, we were found to be compliant. So I'm going to briefly go over some key statistics. There's more statistics both in the background report that you have, as well as we provided online in a public report. But this graph here gives you a sense of the decline in total photo enforcement tickets that have been issued over the years. There was a slight increase in 2022, but not by much. This graph represents the total percentage of vehicles that were caught speeding beyond the set threshold that the equipment has. And a bunch of zeros in between, but the purpose of this is to really show that back in 2001, when the program first started, 3.3% of all vehicles that were going through the monitored zone were found to be speeding beyond the threshold. As of last year, it's down to 0.03%. So there's been a significant decline in the number of vehicles that have been caught speeding, I guess, over that time.
Aaron, what, when you say beyond the threshold, does that mean there's a 5% fudge factor built in, or what does that mean?
So the threshold is, yes, there's a threshold around what triggers an actual ticket. I'm not able to share what that actual number is, but there is definitely a threshold. So as an example, I doing 51 in the 50 zone, the threshold's not that. Now, I can't keep on going to say what it is, but there is that point. And what we've set that threshold at, it's actually set by the police service of jurisdiction, so the RCMP. And the philosophy is that it's set similar to what an officer would issue a ticket at.
Okay, thank you.
And that's maybe a problem with the entire provincial system, is every jurisdiction has a different threshold, right?
That's correct. The guidelines do not set what the threshold should be. So every jurisdiction is a little bit different on that philosophy.
Each officer has their own threshold.
Well, yeah, I guess Ken's right. If you're setting on what an officer thinks, and it depends if it's a school zone or a highway, right? Sorry, threshold doesn't, but the officer's discretion might.
Yep. This next graph is a representation of the collisions in the community. This is a comparison of the reductions that you see at below, where 0.5% increase in minor collisions, a 45% decrease in major collisions, and 100% decrease in fatal collisions. Those are the percentages based on the 3-year average from 2019, 20, and 21. And that's something that's the reason why we've reported it in this way is because the guidelines of the automated traffic enforcement want to see it in this way. I think the key one on here is to note that, relatively speaking, the community has under 15 major collisions a year, and major injury collisions are defined as where one occupant in that collision has been hospitalized. This graph represents fine revenue for the photo enforcement program. We don't have it all the way back. Well, we do have the data back from 2001, but this is obviously just the last 6 years. And you can see within those last 6 years, there's been a significant decrease in the total fine revenue that's received. This also corresponds with that first graph that I showed you with the number of tickets decreasing as well. There's obviously a correspondence with fine revenue and the number of tickets that are issued.
Aaron, do you want to take questions now or do you want them later at the end?
You could interrupt. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, so I had a question around the previous slide. Has there been some work to link, like, I mean, it's self-evident that if you're speeding, then the opportunity for an accident increases. But is there is there a link? I mean, the speeding has dropped off precipitously, but not that much. So I'm just wondering if there's been some statistical work around that, or are there other things involved, like turning across traffic and all those things that aren't enforced? I'm wondering if that's broken out anywhere.
So yes, there's been a number of studies around the correlation between speeding and collisions. And the higher speed that you go increases the severity of the collision that occurs. When the province looked at this, they actually hired MMP back in 2018 and did a fairly comprehensive review of the impacts of photo enforcement on collisions. What they found was it does have a correlation, but the percentages that they quoted was, 1% decrease or impact. The one of the disclaimers that they put in that report, though, and I think it's very important to note is there's so many factors that are involved in, what causes a collision, and it can change from year to year, depending on what a community puts in terms of traffic calming measures or weather patterns, how quick public works in your community gets out to scrape the roads and salt and sand will have an impact on collisions as well. But it is common knowledge, or I guess commonly in the enforcement industry anyways, that there is that correlation. The faster you go, the more severe your collision is if you're in a collision.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks. Is that report public?
Yes. Yeah, and I can definitely share that with council. There's a link that I can provide that provides that MMP report. It's about 200 or 300 pages long. It's got lots of data and information in there. So.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
I of course have anticipated a question like that. And I have actually a report
No way.
from the head of Office of Traffic Safety within Edmonton in 2014. They did a comprehensive literature review in relation to studies, and they came back and they've got all sorts of data as it relates to the link between speed and not only the severity of the collision, but the ability to actually avoid it. It only makes sense if you, for example, you walk into that wall and then you back up 20 feet and you run as hard as you can into that wall. What do you think is going to happen in the sense?
Well, the wall's going to cave in.
Yeah. The wall may give, yeah. So I mean, obviously, that's a kind of a cheesy anecdote, but at the same time, you can obviously see that there's some link. And so the research is there. I have it. I'll share it in relation to it.
Thanks.
So, my background obviously has shown indicated that there's a definite link between the ability to avoid a collision and the severity of the collision as it relates to speed. Like you correctly identified, though, it is just one factor.
Thanks.
Okay. So any questions on fine revenue while I'm on?
Can you had and maybe you're getting to this and it's not associated to fine revenue, but you had total collisions do you have a slide on total collisions? Because you have a 0.5 and on minor, but you have total collisions over the last 3 years actually saw a 9% increase. And then you said there was a slight decrease over the last 3 years of 2%. The average of total non-injury collisions over the last year from the total of 2022 is a 12% increase. So did you have that one? It's on page 6 of the ATE report.
I didn't include it in today's presentation, but it's definitely in that report.
Yeah, I mean, it is in the report, and it just speaks to the fact that even though minor collisions had a slight decrease, the number of total collisions was 9% increase. So I think that's important information to actually raise. And I guess the other question I would have would be around a location breakdown. Are these intersections, are they left turn and cross path, or right angle collisions is the term they use, or is it behind, all of those areas? So.
Yeah, I can speak generally to it. So the page 6 of the report, those are total collisions that are all reportable to the police. So we take those numbers and we put them into these 3 different categories.
Yeah.
Transportation, Dean's group, Donnie's group, provides a very detailed background of what those are. The other thing I can say is that these general numbers also include parking lots, private property. So this is a very general, I guess, summary of those. And the other information we can definitely pull that from.
Yeah, I mean, this could be somebody backing out of, not that I've ever done this, backing out of your garage and hitting your fence, or somebody has moved your garbage can and.
Oh, no.
And you have all sorts of those silly warning buzzers that you ignore and you hit them. But that also, it's not just necessarily road collisions or intersection. Okay, thanks.
Correct. And this is one of the things that the automated enforcement guidelines is interesting in the fact that they want the municipalities and the service providers to provide major, minor, fatal collisions in the community, total collisions of the community. But to your point, it doesn't necessarily mean that the speed and red light cameras or running a red light or stop sign is the causal factor of collision. So
Aaron, on revenue, make a kind of broad statement, but these numbers that, we collect 1.6 million, we make 750,000. That would seem to indicate to me that this is not, the cash cow that many people, it's kind of a myth that is held. These numbers are not huge, and they have declined other than 2020, which I assume would be less cars on the road during COVID.
Yeah, I can speak generally to that. So I don't disagree at all. And I think one of the things that this graph does not show is the total investment that the municipality puts into traffic safety. So in the public report that we provide to the community, in 2022, we spent approximately $800,000 on specific transportation and traffic safety initiatives. So you can argue the money that we actually spend more money on traffic safety than what we're bringing in on traffic safety on this program. And that's one of the things that we're going to be doing, provided that recommendation is approved and the program continues. Annually, we would be providing that information to the community to show the reinvestment in traffic safety that the municipality. And now it's not all in the same cost center or in the same department, but as a collective, as a corporation, there's definitely more spent on traffic safety than what we're bringing in.
Yeah, and I mean, just all the traffic calming that we have already, and we have continued requests from residents to have the transportation department look at other streets where speeding seems to be an issue or a concern of residents. So we've actually got more requests than we're currently able to fulfill. Right. So this is just one tool that helps overall. But it certainly doesn't generate a ton of cash for the
Not in our community, but in some communities it does.
Well, yeah, no, I'm saying we invest more than we get back. So
Yeah,
that's
I
good.
think the overarching calculus in this, I mean, this is a factor, but it's a factor and it's about community and public safety
Yeah.
is what is driving certainly the administrative recommendation on all of this, with all these factors that flush out underneath it, to your point, Council.
Yeah.
This is ultimately about the safety of.
Safety, yeah. Perfect, thank you.
And Aaron, was it 2020? Was that the year that the government changed their rule where they started taking a bigger portion of our revenue? So we used to be a 75-25 split with the province.
17 or something.
And then it went down to 60-40 or something.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what year, if it was prior to COVID. I think it might have been just prior.
Like 17, I think, when we started doing that.
Oh, no, I think it was that long.
It was,
Sorry, Carrie, what?
Might have been 19.
well, yeah, I was around 19 because it was all part of that whole VSU and the switch to a rural crime strategy and.
Because I just, I mean, yeah, 2020,
That was in
obviously less
Beaumont
cars
when
on
they
the
did it.
road as well, but
One of those things that was hidden in the budget that.
Yeah, you wouldn't, it was probably late 2019, but you wouldn't have seen the impact till 2020.
And I think one other thing to mention, if we went back even further into some of the previous years, when the province increased the fine amounts for speeding and you saw a big jump at that time and then it, started to go off. So I guess the point is you don't always want to use fine revenue as an indicator of the trending that's happening in terms of ticket volumes because all those other impacts
Buses and.
happen.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
There's about 16 traffic offenses.
So the next slide here is a snapshot of, what we have in the public report on our website, but it's the traffic safety plan strategic goals, and this is the enforcement traffic safety plan. So it is it's a plan that gets done between the RCMP as well as municipal enforcement, and it helps guide all the targets around traffic safety in the community when we're deploying resources. So the goal is a 20% reduction in major injury collisions by 2023, so 5% each year. And that was using the baseline of 2017 to 2019. And you can see it's due for an update coming next year, and then we'll see some new targets and some new numbers. But based on these numbers, there's been an 18% decrease in major injury collisions when we're using that 3-year baseline. And happy to report over the last couple of years, no fatal collisions. That's always hard to, obviously the goal is 0 fatal collisions. It's hard to show that when you have one that obviously has a big impact or on a percentage basis. So impacts of the new Government of Alberta guidelines. There's a number of them, but I won't get into too much detail, but I'll highlight a few of them. New data collection requirements. So there's a lot of new data that we have to keep and retain and help use in order to review and justify if a new site gets brought in. We have to look at all the collisions. We have to have control sites to compare a certain site to a site that's not being used in order to say whether or not that site is actually working or not. So there's a number of things that we have to collect. The guidelines also prohibited the use of ATE on roads under 40 kilometers an hour. Obviously, other than school zone, playground zones, and construction zones, that doesn't apply. But all the 40 kilometer zones within the residential areas, we can't use any kind of automated enforcement in those.
Did we used to do ATE in residential? Yeah.
One of the things that the province found during their review was there was 2 reasons that there's the 2 reasons of a public concern and conventional enforcement being unsafe. Used to be a justification where a municipality or a police service could set up a site. So if someone called up and said, hey, we have a concern with speeding on our roadway, we could say, okay, that's a public concern, and we could set up automated enforcement. That's no longer allowed. We have to use other analytics and facts and data in order to support whether or not we can go into a zone. The other use of conventional enforcement. So there are roadways such as Ray Gibbon Drive, St. Albert Trail, especially when you're dealing with high traffic volumes where having an officer step out on the road or do any kind of enforcement during those times can be quite unsafe. That used to be a justification and a reason to set up automated enforcement, and that's no longer permitted as well. So we have to then use collision data and other violation data in order to justify that. New site assessments and justifications are required using those new parameters that they set. So all that had to happen. One of the new parameters that they put in is that prior to an automated enforcement zone being considered, the police of jurisdiction have to look at traffic calming measures, basically doing anything you can and having ATE as your last resort. So whether it's conventional enforcement or engineering solutions prior to putting something else in place, which then just increases the administrative work that's required in order to put a new site in.
So Aaron, could you set up an in-person,
Yes.
on Ray
Conventional.
Given or St. Albert Trail and not actually have them jump out and stop the cars, but just collect the data? And then that could be used as justification for a month later, then we say, look,
Absolutely.
speeding on Greg Given, we need to have.
So we have a traffic safety committee within the corporation, and it comprises of RCMP, municipal enforcement, transportation, and we work quite collaboratively with Donnie and Dean's group in terms of metro counters that get set up. And all that data that gets collected will help drive. It does now, but even going into the future, if the program stays status quo, it's going to be key in order to determining if we can set up a zone or not. We definitely need those traffic counters. It wouldn't necessarily be a person out there, but the technology to see if there's violations happening.
Yeah.
The program also prohibited covert ATE monitoring. There was a misconception that all vehicles actually had to be wrapped, similar to what the city of Edmonton used to do when they had their yellow vehicles wrapped. That is one option. You can wrap your vehicles, or put out an A-board sign that alerts the motoring public that automated enforcement is in place. So in our community right now, we're using the A-board signs. And they're being used to ensure, again, that people know that automated enforcement there, the covertness of it is just no longer an acceptable method.
So we publish our locations almost daily, don't we?
Yes, we also publish locations. We publish what we call the site of the day.
Yeah.
So on that day, we will have at least we'll have photo enforcement at that location, but we will also have it at other locations. The other thing that we do is we have on our website, we have all the approved locations on a map that's interactive. And you can click on the actual location. You can see the site justification sheet that says, this is the reason why we're here. And it's a sign off by the RCMP and shows that all the checks and balances are in place prior to using that site.
So that website and the publishing of the daily sites, et cetera, is not enough to eliminate the covert
Correct.
word. You still have to have
Still have to have the A-board signs out showing people that it's being used.
Yeah.
So what all those changes have done, they've really created additional workloads for site justifications, documentation, communication, reporting. It's just raised the bar on that. The new elements really are beyond the capacity of our existing resources. We never really anticipated this coming in. Obviously, it's still happening today. It's just happening at an impact to mainly our peace officer program supervisor, as well as the transportation engineering branch. They're having to collect all this data and report and send reports to the Solicitor General and look at all those inquiries. Service delivery options. So I didn't get into detail in the presentation, but it's in the report. Talks about pros and cons of each option, but just briefly outlined it here. Option A is to remain status quo, keep the contract in place and go through a competitive bid process. And that's option B is to reduce our scope. Reducing the scope would essentially be to designated zones. Designated zones are school zones, playground zones, and construction zones. And then as well as intersection safety devices. Option C would be to increase the scope. One of the things that we're not doing in the community that we could do, provided the province actually lifts their freeze and allows it, is to do enforcement, automated enforcement on stop signs and red light intersections through mobile devices. So essentially, it's a video camera. Officer sitting on the side of the road with a video camera that videos and captures the violation and then can be used as evidence for a ticket to be mailed out. Option D is to cease all AT services and the contract coming up in May of 2024. We've also added an option of option D1, which would be to end automated enforcement, but replace it with traditional enforcement through community peace officers. And then option E would be an in-house service option where we provide the services similar to what the city of Edmonton does.
I just jump in?
I have one quick question before we get into all the other questions.
Should we make this decision today or should we wait for the province to announce something on December 1st?
Very good question. I think the sooner administration gets direction, I think the better, because we're getting really close to the end of the contract. But certainly if the province were to, if council were to provide a direction to administration and the province's direction changes, our ability to move forward with council's direction, then I think that's something where we would come back and ask for further direction, but.
Correct me if I'm wrong, though. I think where the province really indicates is that you have a desire to go with option C, right, and increase the services. In which case, if the province extends the freeze, you maintain the status quo effectively. Full acquisition is everything that has to do with the reduction in service, we can do regardless.
I was actually thinking option E, not that I was really leaning there, but it's such a risky one if they eliminate it, right? So.
The cost of in-house is just astronomical.
Yeah, not that I'm thinking that, but the risk of
Yes.
taking it over or even D1 would be doing it more and buying equipment and that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, when we get into some of those other options, again, the report was fairly high level, didn't get into a lot of detail, but once we start getting into D1 or E, then we'd have to do a deeper dive as to what are those cost implications and how long process in order to implement that. The E would be multi-year. D would be probably multi-year as well, but a little bit less, right? By the time you do recruitment and other things like that and get equipment and.
So the question I was.
Okay, yeah, I'll let you go now. Yeah, because I feel like we're just a little premature on this, but.
I have one more slide. I can.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah, I was just gonna, actually was related to 2 slides ago or a couple slides ago in relation to the program changes, because that has a ramification, even if we, regardless of a decision date, we decide to keep it. I mean, we're gonna lose the ability to monitor up to what you said, 25% of our existing sites. So how many monitors, how many approved sites do we have currently, including school zones? I think we have about I think you said 55, huh?
I believe we have about 120 or 130.
120.
Approved today.
That's more than I thought, actually, because if we choose one of those options where we just designated ATAE sites, we would just eliminates 55 monitored sites. So that would, then we would keep those potentially construction zones, the school sites and the 3 intersection cameras. Okay, I was just curious as to how many we had. I could have found that out, but I was just curious because you did identify, you said 25% because of the changes, we wouldn't be allowed to have them in basically just site justifications would eliminate them right off the hop, which requires work to identify. And then we would also need. Yeah, so I'm just trying to figure out the numbers that would be impacted. If the government, right now with the new guidelines, we're already going to be down some sites, right? So, and if the government doesn't allow us to increase the sites without, I mean, they haven't put a moratorium on, if we can justify it, is my understanding, we could add a site. if let's say all of a sudden we started seeing incredible, I'm just picking this out of the air, people, and incredible collision statistics at the Jensen Lakes and St. Albert Trail turnoff, could we justify
Today,
well, not today, but with the right amount of collection of data, and could we add that as an intersection safety camera now under what the existing justifications are?
yes, absolutely. So we could in the future, but because of the freeze, as an example, we can't add anything, even a zone or a designated zone. But if the freeze were to get lifted.
Yeah.
And we were able to meet the standards and the guidelines where it talks about a certain percentage of collisions.
Right.
Then absolutely,
That's the clarification I wanted, because when we were talking, I thought, oh, well, if they came out with the new site justifications and documentation and everything, it was implied that if we met that, we could add a site, but you're correcting me now and saying, no, the freeze is still on, and regardless, we can't do that. So all of our new growth areas, like school zones in Jensen Lakes, the Lois Hole School Zone, the all the new Riverside intersections and all that, we can't add anything there.
correct. As of today, we're not.
Yeah. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was clear. Okay.
I'm sure if I can just make a comment just to your earlier point, the recommendation that comes out of the committee meeting today will be before council on December 5th.
Yeah.
And with the expectation that November 30th is any sort of announcement coming from the province, assuming we get it. So we'll have a small window.
Maybe. Yeah.
And depending on if we decided to go with status quo, it usually takes 6 months for an RFP anyways, right? Approximately. So we would have to get the RFP out by December, because you're May of 2024.
Have we provided input to the province on,
Oh, yeah.
like, as a municipality, or I don't know? That we would, let's say, for example, we want to be able to monitor in 40 kilometers an hour zones, like, I would assume that would be. Every municipality in Alberta would be asking for that.
When the province did their review originally, there was some engagement with municipalities. There was a couple of meetings and an opportunity to provide that. I took that into account back then. Since that time, there hasn't been anything that we've provided. Informally, there's been conversations between myself and some of the program leaders at the Solicitor General. I also know that Alberta Chiefs of Police Association and some of the local police organizations have provided some feedback to the province about the freeze and about other things that they're monitoring and the impacts that it's having. So
I presented to enough committees.
Rick MacGyver was Minister of Transportation when this happened?
No, it was Brian Mason.
Okay. But then
I believe I presented that.
I think Rick might have extended some.
Yeah, well, they had to extend some of it. Yeah. Believe it was there.
Can I just confirm, Aaron? So when we're talking automated transit, traffic enforcement, it's not just the speed on side roads or it's speed on green, red light cameras included as well, right?
that's correct. Yeah, speed on green, red light cameras, and then the mobile enforcement.
Okay.
That occurs. So last slide, administration's recommendation is option A, as outlined in the report, which is status quo. This maintains the current traffic safety service levels approved by council and maintains the available and efficient use of current traffic safety methods for the community in a time when law enforcement resources are expensive and come at a generally increased cost. The impacts of that recommendation, however, there's likely an increased investment in staffing resource requests in 2025. Hard for us to say definitively what that looks like. Part of that is we have to go through an internal process to see what level, what position that is. Is there other things that we can do internally prior to asking for that resource? And then if this were to go forward, even the contract process and seeing what services the contractor will be able to provide in order to reduce the internal staffing impacts has to be looked at as well.
I have another question.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So in relation to that option status quo that or either the options that require perhaps an increase in staffing just to manage some of the new workload. Could that be included in the contractor responsibility?
There is portions that will be able to, I believe. But the province in their new guidelines have what they did in this current version of they've outlined the responsibilities of the police of jurisdiction, the municipality and the contractor. And they've actually prevented contractors from providing certain services. To, you know, avoid cash cow perceptions, and things like that. So any kind of services that they would provide could be analytical.
Yeah.
But a lot of that also hinges on, they don't have the data. We have to then provide the data to them through our means internally. So it's a little bit of a review of how do they get to the data and provide that back to us.
And if one of the options was in-house or potentially kind of run, have we ever approached the Office of Traffic Safety within Edmonton? Because they operate an in-house service and they do all of their kind of processing. Would
Approach
they?
them to do it for us, contract them?
Yeah, either would they have to apply? They would have to respond to the RFP, or would we just potentially knock on their door and say, do you have the capacity to deal with our number? Because like, what are we talking in numbers?
So they definitely, if we went through an RFP, they would be able to respond to the RFP. Discussions about whether or not we partner with a municipality outside of the RFP process. I would suggest maybe that might be an in-camera discussion and look at what those potentially look like. There's opportunities for that.
Yeah.
The willingness of other municipalities in that process, I don't have.
Yeah, no, and I'm not, I mean, there's a number of logistical hurdles that we would have to climb before we could do that, but potentially it's an opportunity as well. Okay, sorry.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. So a quick question, Aaron. I'm just trying to figure out what is the actual revenue rate now that we're getting from, like, let's assume that nothing changes and the status quo maintains itself, et cetera. And there's no changes next year to the contract. What is our actual revenue that we're bringing in? Because I'm seeing one thing that says 800,000, but that was to eliminate by 44%, then eliminate entirely to 670,000. So how much are we actually generating for revenue each year?
It's so if we were to maintain, if the recommendation was approved, the 2024 budget has $667,000 in net revenue. So that's net after expenses is what the program is, what we're estimating the program to bring in.
Okay, and so even if we had the additional staff person, it would still be about $500,000 at minimum that we would still be expecting to net.
That's correct.
Right? Okay.
Correct.
Then if we want to cancel it, we basically are raising the taxes by another 0.5%. The other question, so just to explain to me, if it says reduce scope and the cons eliminate 55 monitored sites, but then it says the fine revenue is 800 to $1 million. So can you just help me understand that one bullet point?
No problem. So that estimate's based on current trending of the percentages of tickets that are issued in the designated zones and tickets that are issued in some of the mobile sites that would get eliminated. Now, that trending may change. So if that option was selected by council, you may see more time being spent in school zones, playground zones, and construction zones, which would then change that estimated number. But for the purposes of the report and kind of ballpark figures, that's why you see that number there, is because 8% of tickets that are issued right now are issued in mobile sites and intersections versus the school zones, playground zones,
I think
construction sites.
it might be, though,
If you reduce our scope, you're saying 800 to $1 million in revenue, but you just said in the budget's only, but this
that would be before expenses.
Correct. That's
Yeah.
before.
I think that's
Yes.
trying to reconcile, Councillor Hughes.
Okay, so that's like gross revenue, not net revenue is what you're saying.
What I could share is that if the reduced scope option was selected,
Yeah.
In 2024, we would estimate anywhere from $100,000 to $215,000 in net revenue.
Okay, perfect. Okay, that helps me understand that. That bullet point was a little confusing. Okay, and so just to be clear about the timing, so the recommendation is to do it now, but if the province were to change something at the end of the month, because you never know where they're gonna go, I have no idea. Would this then be brought forward to us at just the next council meeting, just to confirm that this is where we wanted to go? Or what would be the plan on that if we do vote on it now, but something changes from the province? Because I'm assuming that we're voting on this now, assuming that the province extends their moratorium. Is that correct?
That is our assumption is that,
Yeah.
well, not that they're gonna extend it, actually, they've already extended it twice, so.
Right.
Best guess at this point, it's hard to say, but I would say it's probably time for them to lift it. There's been some pressure to lift that, especially with new growth in the. What I would say is that if this was approved today, if there was something significant that impacted council's direction to us, then we would come back. If it didn't impact that, then we probably wouldn't come back.
So I guess regardless if they extend it or they don't extend it, your recommendation is just the status quo.
That's
Is
correct.
that, okay, so that's why we're bringing it forward now is really because that the province's decision, assuming it's A or B, which is extend or don't extend it, just don't put any additional restrictions. You would still recommend the same answer today, or even if it was in December, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, perfect. That's all the questions. Thank you.
So status quo,
So if, let's say in December 1st or November 30th, whatever, province relaxes some of the restrictions, status quo, you would interpret that as now we can go into,
Jensen Lakes, or now we can
go to residential if it says
So,
do 40.
yeah, so status quo is to provide approximately 7,000 hours of automated enforcement in the community with mobile enforcement plus 3 intersection screening devices. That's the status quo services. The detail of what sites we go to and how that gets deployed is almost a little bit of a separate conversation in terms of depending on what the guidelines and what the province directs us to. But for council's direction to administration is, do you want to provide 7,000 hours of service to the community through automated enforcement, or do you want to increase that, or do you want to decrease that? That helps frame it up a little bit better.
Status quo is hours, not, okay, so if they relax some of the restrictions, and let's say council wants you to increase the hours, how do we get that done? Like, I feel like the motion today could be recommend to council that administration takes advantage of every location and, safety clause or whatever, which would then probably increase the hours.
Yeah.
Relaxations.
But when
Maybe we can cross that bridge.
when we reduced the hours, we didn't need a council motion. We reduced the hours, we were,
We reduced the hours because we were forced
To reduce them.
no, correct me if I'm wrong, we reduced the hours just because that's the contractor approached us.
This hinges on the RFP.
Yeah.
Right, and so if there's a desire to increase the overall approach, right? And so I think to Darren's point, sorry to back up for a minute, if you approve the status quo.
Yeah.
The footprint and what that looks like will morph in accordance with the provincial direction, right? To the maximum
7,000 hours.
that's identified in the RFP. If you want more than that, there's a cost to that we'd have to identify, and that the RFP would need to be amended then to reflect that. So that process, everything hinges on that process, would be a scope change all the time.
timing.
Yeah, well, it is hard. Does the $670,000, does that go into general revenue or does that go into the reserve?
So we identified, and then maybe I'll pass it on to Diane on the exact finances, but it does get identified in the emergency services budget up
Yeah.
line.
Yeah.
That's where the police costs.
Yeah.
Costs all come in. But at the end of the day, I guess it generally goes into,
Revenue.
keep on going down, it generally goes into general revenue.
Yeah. But it's designated for traffic safety initiatives, RCMP officers, MES officers, not on the line, it's in your budget that way, right? I mean, we don't specifically say we're gonna turn the $670,000 in MES officers.
No, there's no specific policy direction on that. There is, however, policy direction from council on 50% of the proceeds of speed on green revenue goes into the traffic safety reserve.
Yeah.
Which then Dean's group and Donnie's group uses to fund some projects as well, but that's not their only funding option, as you guys.
Yeah, because I think the documentation shows that reserve at 810,000 something, $400. Yeah, which is healthy.
I think that's a very key important thing to.
Yeah.
And that might be something that we can review internally as well later on, is to really show that linkage. Because I think it's very important that everyone understands that the corporation is spending $800,000 plus every year on traffic safety initiatives, which is superseding any of the
Revenue.
net revenue that we're getting from the program. So you could argue that we're reinvesting all that in that through that process. It's just coming through different funding envelopes.
So
Keep going.
so the report identified right now, the established strength of the RCMP traffic sections is 6. I think there's 5 constables and a corporal. And then there's 2 MES officers or that are specifically assigned to traffic.
And 6 RCP, right?
Well, 6 RCMP, but right now we know that right now, I believe the last information I had was corporal was still there. And there were 2 modified duty members working traffic because of the staffing challenges faced by the RCMP. They've had to pull traffic services and put them in general response. Are your MES guys still out there doing enforcement?
Yeah.
And they're doing complaint, kind of public complaint focused traffic work, or are they in high collision locations? How are you assigning guys?
So the two community peace officers, when we're at full strength, they do proactive work. So those targets are collaborated. We collaborate with the RCMP traffic corporal. And what I spoke about earlier about the enforcement traffic safety plan, that helps guide where those resources are being deployed. And it's really around areas that are reducing major injury collisions and fatal collisions. Those are the targets. However, they do other things as well. As an example, they'll do parking tickets. They'll do other areas that we get complaints on proactively, or even the odd resident complaint that comes in because you can't use automated enforcement for that process anymore.
Yeah.
Then the officers will go out there and.
I kind of raised that because, I mean, obviously one of the options is to increase the MES established strength by 6 actually officers, and the associated costs to that. I mean, are.
So I have questions related to that.
Yeah.
Does the revenue generated from those officers, whether it's parking or speed, cover their salary?
No. So our latest projections is it's a little bit over half. If it was a full-time traffic duty officer, you may expect budget-wise, maybe $50,000-$60,000. Their expenses are obviously higher than that.
Yeah.
And it's a hard number to predict. Obviously there's humans and we're dealing with things that training, court time, all the detractors that go away from the actual monitoring on the roadway. So when we did the math and we looked at all those numbers, and that's where we came up with 6 officers would be required in order to provide 7,000 hours of monitoring on the roadway. But the revenue that they're going to be bringing in is not as efficient
As ATE.
as automated enforcement.
It's too bad, honestly, because then you get the demerits and. Yeah.
Absolutely. The deterrents are, I don't think it can be argued that they're stronger with in-person traditional enforcement as a result of.
And can your CPOs issue? Is it probably not criminal, like DUIs,
No.
not wearing your seatbelt?
Yes.
Yes.
Any traffic safety offense, yes, under the Traffic Safety Act.
But not a DUI.
Regulations. Once it starts getting into criminal, that's something that the province does not allow. It's not an option.
Could they quickly call the RCMP and say?
And that is the practice. So if they come across that, we share a radio, we share a dispatch, all those factors, and it's very quick because our jurisdictional boundaries are so small generally in comparison to other municipalities. So the RCMP are there fairly quickly.
Because that's how it's been. Ken,
Yeah, no, yeah. Have we ever looked?
you see a gun in the backseat.
You,
Whatever, right?
you leave. That's it, like, this is a little oddball question. But I mean, have we ever, has there ever been conversations with the province and the sheriffs around increasing their ability to do enforcement within municipalities? I know there was some chat talking around public highways, so Anthony Henday, things like that, but could they potentially work on St. Albert Trail?
The sheriffs?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we call those joint force operations as you know, and there are those opportunities. It's just a matter of the collaboration and everyone having the resources to do that. And our community peace officers can also go into other jurisdictions to assist with those joint force operations.
Yeah, but I mean, theoretically, they could work in St. Albert on highways without working in a coordinated fashion with our municipal enforcement or even the RCMP. Let's say they're on the way to court, they stop the vehicle. Okay,
Yep, they have that authority.
does the revenue?
Or not their policy.
Yeah.
Their guidance within the sheriff's branch allows that.
Yeah.
I can't speak to.
No, I'm just curious in relation to maybe another opportunity to increase some visibility. Anyways, I can put forward the,
Shelley wants to do, but just to make sure we've got questions
okay, sorry.
taken care of. No.
Yep, you bet.
Counselor Hughes, are you good? Okay, everyone else have any more questions? Go ahead, Shelley.
Okay, I'd like to put forward the recommended motion that the standing committee of the whole recommend to council that automated enforcement services levels be maintained as outlined in option A, status quo in the attached report entitled Automated Traffic Enforcement Background and Service Delivery Options.
All right, I'll accept that. Go ahead.
Okay, and well, it's clear through the data we're successful. I mean, everything's down. The one little raise in between 21 and 22, I think, is just attributed to nobody driving in 2021, but success across the board. And as far as, you know, like officers or adding other enforcement, there's nothing stopping an officer from stopping anyone on the road anytime if they have the time or the ability. And we're earning money from this. It can be adjusted to the levels that we need, the locations that we need. And I don't see a means for or a reason to fix something that's not broken. It's doing a good job in all the data.
Go ahead, Councilor Broadhead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Certainly going to support this motion. I believe that automated traffic enforcement brings real value to our community. Have one example. Some months ago, we received a letter from a guy complaining that he had received an $800 speed on green red light camera violation, and he was complaining that he got the ticket.
How fast was he going?
Well, so my question is, I don't know what it takes to get an $800 speed on green ticket. And he got a very nice response from the city of St. Albert, telling him what to do, blah, blah, blah. I wanted to respond to him and say, get the hell out of our community if you're blowing through red lights at that kind of speed. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what your rationale is. If somebody dies when you're blowing through a red light at 100 kilometers an hour in a 60-kilometer zone. However, I didn't send that email, even though I wish I had. Anyway, this gets my vote.
Councilor Hughes, any comments? Hey,
Yeah,
go ahead, Mike.
just echo Councillor Broadhead's comments that had the opportunity to talk to one of the photo radar enforcement officers. And she explained to me that they had recently had a person going up St. Albert Trail Hill caught at 103 kilometers an hour. That was an area where we were receiving through, you know, Facebook posts, comments that, you know, why are they there? I just stopped and talked to them on the way home one day after work, after a council meeting. And then she relayed to me that earlier they had got someone doing 130 in that zone. So clearly, we still have speeding in our neighborhood. This is one tool that will help us address it. It is definitely not, when we see the numbers, definitely not a cash cow as some perception. We reinvest that money back into overall traffic safety in our neighborhood. And I think this is a good solution going forward. I personally would much rather have just a photo radar ticket, although the discussion with my wife, I could not imagine if I got demerit points from a direct officer, that would be a totally different discussion. So I'll take small benefit here in just getting the ticket. But so I'm very supportive of this. And I think we do a good job of communicating it to our residents through the Facebook chat announcement of, current locations, the interactive map. And so I think we're upfront with our residents of where this is and should be absolutely supported.
Well, I obviously going to support this and I appreciate all the work Aaron and your staff do. I appreciate all the work that has gone into your report. I mean, obviously, as somebody that's worked in fatal collisions, I've seen the causal link between speed and the severity of a collision. I spoke to that earlier, but also as somebody that's been personally impacted, it's been November 10th, 2003, my niece was killed by a speeding drunk driver. Well, I obviously have some personal skin in the game here. So, I mean, if we can stop the pain and the heartache that impacts family from something like this, then, I mean, to your point, Council Brady, like, there's no excuse. There's no excuse whatsoever. And I mean, I'm seeing actually some degradation in some of our traffic enforcement and some of our driver behavior. I mean, I see it every day in front of my home. I see it every day in some of our major streets and thoroughfares. And the more we can actually do in relation to this, I think the better. I mean, an officer always has discretion. I mean, you always have discretion that has been pointed out a number of different times. If you stop that individual and there's reasons behind that offense, well, the officer can always use his or her discretion. So I don't understand why residents or other individuals don't see any benefit in this at all. I mean, it is a specific deterrent and it's shown its effectiveness all over the world in reducing collisions. So I support this, obviously.
I'll support this as well. I found it interesting, some of the pros and cons, all the options we were talking about public perception. I don't care. I honestly don't care what the public thinks about this one thing. If you think it's a cash cow, I call it a tax on people breaking the law, right? And I opened up one just the other day. The city of St. Albert's gave Edmonton some money, but I don't open up a ticket like that and blame anyone but myself. So the solution, if you don't like automatic traffic enforcement in St. Albert, is drive the speed limit. Simple as that. Simple as that. So I would not want to ever see taxes raised because people weren't getting penalized for speeding. So I have no problem with this one. And honestly, I'd like to see more in person. I'd like to see
So RCMP back out there when they're
at full capacity because I want to get some of those real timely deterrents and the demerits as well. And whatever you guys can do with your two officers is great, but there is obviously certain places in the city that we can't be everywhere at all times, and there's certain places that are just not safe. So that's where ATE is even more effective. So I'm fine with this one. Anything to close, Shelley?
No, I just agree with, everyone's comments and my sympathy to Councillor Mackay. And the good news is a lot of the data is showing there's less people speeding. And I do see it out there on the streets. There's a lot of people driving very slowly too, like 20 kilometers in the 40s and whatever. So I mean, I think it's a success all around, and there'll always be the certain individuals that won't obey any law, but we're doing the best we can, and we're a success right now. So
Speaking of the data, we just do total collisions, but of course, population is increasing. So is there in the future maybe a total per capita over the years? Because since 17, there's probably 1,000 more cars on the road as well. So that would probably make it even look more effective, I would think.
Yeah.
I just didn't include it.
It's it would probably be part of Donnie's area or Dean's. They rode kilometers per, impacted as well, because as our community grows, kilometers grow, right?
Yeah.
Number of vehicles grow. So I mean, Edmonton tracks, they track number of license plates receiving multiple tickets.
Oh.
So like you're part of the 13,227 that received. Their hours, 54,745. So.
All right, call for the vote. All right, Councillor Hughes is in favor. That's unanimous. We're gonna get a cup of tea while everybody moves chairs. So.
And Brian will join in later. I'll go over there when we're done with going. This is all.
I don't want you over there.
I'm in the penalty box. I like that one. Like,
Okay. Elizabeth. Thank you for all the work you've done on this. You have a bit of a presentation?
I do have a bit of a presentation. Probably the first time I've ever come here with a presentation that has no pictures in it. Like even Aaron's presentation just now had some graphs in it. Feels very anti-culture.
Culture.
To help balance that out, I'm hoping that any questions you have will be presented in either some form of literary or performing arts.
So we have to sing?
Yeah, something like that.
You don't want me doing either. No questions from this corner.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to come and have this discussion with you. The request from council to look at options for modernizing the Founder's Day policy has been a real opportunity for us to just open up a healthy dialogue around what we currently do and what we could be doing. The group that was around the table was very excited about the possibility. And so it's not always that you get to have a conversation that feels so good to have. So thank you. I will let you know that my colleagues, Andrea Gammon, Manager of Cultural Programming, and Tamsin Brooks, our Community Culture Coordinator, are available online should you have any questions. So the existing policy included a proclamation read verbatim annually. However, early last year, our partner organization, Arts and Heritage Foundation, identified that the continued celebration of Founder's Day with an unchanging proclamation may limit the opportunities to respond to community values and diversity in storytelling, and may not be providing the ideal vehicle for embracing the dynamic tapestry of our community's history. In early 2023, council supported the motion asking Admin and Arts and Heritage Foundation to explore opportunities for modernization. At this point, I would actually like to recognize the St. Albert Historic Society, which is no longer in existence, and the council that approved the initial Founder's Day policy. I think that recognizing that there are stories and there are people that have contributed to where we are today is such an important value for a community to have. And I think that that is exactly the foundation and the stepping stone that has brought us here today. And so a really important moment in time to be recognized.
But if it says in the background, or you talked about the Historical Society.
Yeah.
And it said, as the organizing step back from hosting the event. What did they use?
Yeah, so they used to hold a Founders Day event. It happens at the Arden, sometimes at the museum. And it was very similar to what the proclamation was. It was an opportunity to gather and talk about the founders and tell some stories about how St. Albert started its journey towards incorporation.
I don't remember that. Okay, yeah, thanks.
Oh, you are getting older.
Our conversation centered around the remarkable abundance of spaces and places and people in St. Albert, all of which hold unique stories and opportunities for us to celebrate how they've contributed to history. As we know, our city is brimming with history, culture, and heritage. And this gave us an opportunity to look at, are there other ways for us to celebrate what makes St. Albert, St. Albert? The focus primarily was on inclusivity and the commitment to acknowledging and celebrating the multitude of contributions that have shaped our community. By revising the policy to remove the annual proclamation, we thought we could open the door to a more inclusive, diverse, and vibrant celebration of St. Albert's identity. In essence, we were looking to take a step forward to embrace the richness of our history and to showcase opportunities for telling stories from an expanded vantage point. Our project team consisted of representatives from Culture Branch, Family and Community Support Services Branch, Government and Indigenous Relations and Environment, and the Arts and Heritage Foundation. We embarked on a mission to review the policy, the existing proclamation, and opportunities for community celebration. During early discussions, we anticipated the need to engage with other groups. However, as we delved into the policy, it quickly became clear that a modernized approach to cultural heritage recognition would impact everyone in the community. This is not about a few, it's about all of us, our stories, our shared history, our shared future, and how we see ourselves reflected in those stories. The ability to tell the stories and celebrate it as a collective. As our project team continued their discussions, as I mentioned, we couldn't contain our excitement about the prospect of all of the incredible cultural groups in St. Albert, newcomers and longtime residents coming together to participate, contribute, learn, and be seen in an updated policy. We definitely saw how hard it is to stay at a governance level because we got very excited about the potential for tactics. In the policy review, we encountered a unique challenge. The existing policy had a static, unchanging proclamation, which felt unusual for this city. At the time, we could identify no other policy that had a standing proclamation within it. This meant that it couldn't respond to the evolving landscape of social priorities, changing values, or significant milestones in our communities, like Ukrainian immigrant contribution to our community, or our anniversaries of other things related to incorporation or other contributions. And this is not the first time we've encountered a challenge similar to this. When we were going through Founders Walk Phase 3 stakeholder consultations, we did one discussion with the Métis local about the identified interpretive notes. And the first question the elders and knowledge keepers asked us was, where are the matriarchs? And they recognized the stories we were telling were primarily about the men that had contributed at a singular point in time. And they said, but each of those men had a mother and a wife and a sister standing beside them. Removing the proclamation as suggested would have left the policy with little purpose or content. So instead of recommending a policy revision, we are proposing that council rescind the existing policy. In its place, introducing a new high-level governance policy that opens up opportunities for celebration. This shift aligns our policy with our dynamic and ever-evolving community. It's about adapting to change, embracing progress, and celebrating our collective journey. The proposed policy addresses modernization and also aligns with goals of vibrancy, This policy, which we're suggesting to be retitled as the St. Albert Heritage Recognition Policy, is modernization of the intent of the original policy, the original intent being to celebrate St. Albert. The policy statement is the heart of this transformation. The City of St. Albert will recognize the stories and contributions of all, promoting the rich heritage and diverse culture of the community. This statement encapsulates a commitment to celebrating our city's history, along with continuing to tell the stories that were previously told through the Founder's Day policy. In this new policy, we've clearly defined what we mean by culture and heritage, making it easier for everyone to understand and embrace the breadth of our community's legacy. We've also included responsibilities, which were not a part of the original policy. Governing Council could provide strategic direction on when and how heritage recognition is considered. The Chief Administrative Officer will work to identify opportunities and the resources needed to celebrate St. Albert. The standards and expectations spotlight includes recognition of the standards and expectations includes recognition of the importance of First Nations culture. This was not intended to be a spotlight or to exclude anyone, but recognize the origin story of where our community's story begins, starting with First Nations culture. The continued commitment to annual reflection on heritage achievements. St. Albert is really good at sharing stories and history at events. This suggested new policy to replace the proposed rescinding of the Founder's Day policy formalizes and strengthens this tradition. It provides a foundation for work we're already doing to support cultural interpretation, including operations in the Musée Heritage Museum and heritage sites through our partner organization, Arts and Heritage Foundation, messaging we may share at flag raisings or proclamations that we share at other events. It gives council the flexibility to consider other opportunities for celebrations, events, or exhibits like Heritage Days, Alberta Days, Canada Culture Days, Canadian Heritage Month. In the future, keeping our community vibrant and providing time for reflection. In closing, we stand at an existing crossroads. We're exploring the need to rescind the static Founder's Day policy and embrace a new dynamic St. Albert Heritage Recognition policy. With this shift, we open the door to a world of opportunities, celebrating not just the past, but every story, contribution, person, and community that continues to make our city exceptional. The possibilities are endless, and together we're poised to create a more vibrant approach to how St. Albert recognizes our shared history. We're keen to hear whether this addresses council's expectations for modernization of the policy, are available to answer any questions, and can look to return with additional revisions to a new policy should council wish. Oh, I thought I had a question slide. This would be your opportunity. And for your interpretive dance, should you?
Okay, I just have one quick one. Well, two, I guess. It says in the policy annually set aside time to reflect on the achievements.
What would that look like right now?
Yeah, well, like if we're gonna do this annually, have you started already brainstorming what that looks like?
We did have a discussion that we would very much like to return in January, as we would have previously without the proclamation, to talk about a story about St. Albert that could help us sort of bridge into a new year. Looking back, we'll celebrating the future.
So this January, you
Yes.
have something, but I think
In the similar form of proclamation, but also we would continue to do the things that we are doing, like our focus on the heritage sites, continuing to expand what we are including in our archives and collection through the museum as well. So sharing those more frequently. We have a digital exhibit coming up through the museum on St. Albert Place to celebrate this building. So there's lots of good stuff that's already in the works that would fit within the boundaries of this policy.
right, yeah, it's pretty broadly worded, but I see annually as an event that I would want to see the public included at. And if we just do something in chambers, that's not really a public event. So in the policy, it says council, one of our responsibilities shall provide direction. So when and how do you want this council to provide you direction? Because I feel like it doesn't say should or could, it says shall, so.
Should.
Yeah, so my first thought would be, I'd like to do something, I'm fine with January, but that the public could attend, right?
I would love the opportunity to come back with some recommendations from admin for what a singular event could look like. I'm guessing it would probably be something around Heritage Days or Alberta Days. But would like to give you some options for that. We did not consider it to be a singular event when we said annually, but recognize that we wanted to make sure that every year we found an opportunity.
Is it your question?
I have quite a few.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna-
When I'm
Might ask my.
weighing one policy against the other, I kind of see the new an improved version, so to speak, as just eliminating history. Essentially, it's more just a generic. You could celebrate, you know, we already celebrate Heritage Day in St. Albert. There's nothing blocking us from doing that continually. And in the original policy, it also says council may also recognize and celebrate Founder's Day by other means each year. So it's already in the policy. It's already in the current policy acknowledging First Nations when where the new policy is taking that out of there. So it's not mentioned any longer. The intent, and I remember the plays they did up for Founder's Day back in the day, they had their costumes and everything. And intent of that was to be the founding of St. Albert, the name behind it. And so in the new policy, that's removed. It's just a celebration of everything that St. Albert is and people that live here, which is a Heritage Day celebration, not a Founder's Day celebration. So I see them as different. And so like, why was it, and then you've got in the new policy, like just the CAO kind of recording history and celebrating stories. So how did you come up with, you know, just recording history that no one sees? And how did you come up with 5,000 years? Like, why not 30,000 years?
Thank you so much for that question. So I will tell you that the project team, their intention was not to remove history. In fact, the story and the celebration that happens within the Founder's Day proclamation, these are important stories. We would not exist without them. We do need to tell them, but we need to tell different facets of them on a regular basis. And the proclamation did not provide the opportunity for that. With the identification as a responsibility for the CAO to be collecting those stories. We currently already have an archive that we are retaining those stories for, but it's not included within any governance policy at this point. So it was that opportunity to establish that work and that responsibility through a governance document because it's continued work that has existed. And I believe that the opportunity to celebrate Founder's Day, like you said, with some of the reenactments that happen, I think we will always see reenactments happen for incorporation as a town or an understanding of what went into the mission being built or the Métis families developing their river lots or, you know, even the discussions we're having, we're going to have opportunities to celebrate those things and put them on stages or in spaces or places where we can go and learn about it and develop that immense pride for the extremely hard work our parents and grandparents and great grandparents and everyone before that put into making this community what it is. And so the intention was never to eliminate that. It was to be able to add to it. As for the time frame, it's really around the amount of time that we have records on, that we have archaeological records on to establish that there were people here living in this community that we now call St. Albert. And so knowing that that is a place where we actually can start the story from with confidence.
And how do you describe the difference between records and stories? Like when I hear stories, that could be anything, right?
Well, and a record is a story. So records are changing. For a very long time, they were written or photographic or physical records. There's been a real shift when it comes to how museums and archives collect history, including oral traditions and stories, the narratives, and often they do get documented and written down and added to the collection. But it is a very different way of learning about the past. It's not so much like on this date at this time. It's a little bit more about what the experience was, what the hardships were, what people had to get through in order for that to happen, rather than on January 3rd, 1973, exactly this happened.
Okay, and then with eliminating the term Founders Day, is the intent to eliminate Founders Walk, the name of Founders Walk as well?
You know, I don't know what the future of Founders Walk is. I do know that the current capital charter that is in under Founders Walk is starting to include increased facets of cultural interpretation beyond incorporation, because we are looking to tell some stories that happened before incorporation as part of it. But when you look at founders, we've traditionally defined that as, you know, the people that were responsible for incorporation. We can expand that. Everybody who's contributed to our community was a founder to this community.
Should put that definition in the policy, founder.
Yeah, what is a founder?
Actually,
Well, and a founder could have been yeah, I mean, the founder is essentially the person or persons that built the city initially. That's what founding means. But heritage is a separate celebration. So like, I feel like we're watering down one for the other when we could have both. You know, that's kind of how I'm seeing it. So I'm not quite clear on your clarification between the two of those. And so it wouldn't be a mention of the original formation of St. Albert in the new policy. It would just be a celebration of how St. Albert kind of evolved forever, which is essentially all the different cultures, all the different types, all the different families and stuff, but no recognition of the initial start as much then, right?
I think that if council wanted us to continue to recognize components associated with that incorporation date, that is something that we could have a conversation around, that's a strategic priority. But from the policy perspective, it is about that wider scope of contribution.
Okay, because I see heritage as like the people and the you know, the records of the city as a different entity, right? You know, it's more concrete and the other one's people. So we celebrate all peoples in St. Albert. We do a very good job of it. And the policy is saying that we can do it in many different means as well. So I'm just concerned about the misses in the second one. You know, it's again, do you think it may not be watered down too much?
I think it's really exciting. I know that the project team's intention was to take the intent of the original policy and modernize it to allow the opportunity to celebrate more, because there is more to celebrate. I can't speak for every project team member.
Right.
But the description of the second policy does not align with the conversations that were had.
Okay, I'll leave it for now then. Thank you.
Councilor McCart.
Yeah, no, I'll be quick. I mean, I like the idea of where this is going in the sense of
I mean, I don't like it just to be one day though. I mean, it's gonna be. I mean, even initially when I was thinking about removing the proclamation, I thought here's an opportunity actually where rather than the mayor doing the proclamation, you could actually go, you could include it in other events, like you could involve schools, you could do part of Children's Festival, part of Heritage Days, part of Alberta Days, where you wouldn't actually have a proclamation, you could have, like, wouldn't it be neat if African descendants and read the proclamation? So I mean, I don't believe that you remove something. I think you just keep additive, and I think it's inclusionary. So I like it. I mean, I'm not worried in relation to CAO. I mean, I just see that as more like you've identified as it's a governance. And I mean, I don't expect Mr. Fletcher to be sitting there collecting historical artifacts. Well, I mean, other than the ones he's already got in his office and oral traditions. I mean, I see that as just an administrative role. He can delegate that to you, for example. But that was the kind of question in relation to that. I mean, I think when you were talking about it, it kind of raised the idea around, I mean, the proclamation was a nice idea because but I wouldn't expect the mayor to do the proclamation. So that's kind of where I'm wondering if there's the opportunity then to get that out there. So, I mean, it's not really a question, and I apologize, but I mean, I think that if we had just a proclamation, you know, you're right. You're standing up in this council, or you're doing a video, or you're doing something at an event, but you're not engaging with the actual public. So how do we best do that is I guess a really bad way of getting to a bad question. I don't know. How do we?
Well, I think once the policy's approved, then maybe secondary.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, is that like, what is that? How do we do that? How do we accomplish that? Like, I mean, because we live our history all the time, is there a need to actually recognize it at one special event? Is that that's about as interpretive as I can possibly get.
Nope. Don't know if I can answer.
No, you can't.
But I can say that when we were having tactical conversations and looking at what other communities were doing, we saw some really interesting initiatives, including the introduction of a historian laureate. So City of Edmonton has 2 historian laureates. They are identified to be representative of 2 different communities. And they speak a few times a year, often at sod turning ceremonies. Well, the community is celebrating breaking ground and future development. Their historian laureate will tell a story of what happened on that land before. They also go into schools, as you mentioned, and they do come to events like Canada Day or Culture Days, and they will also share a similar story that they will thread throughout the entire year. And it provides more places and spaces again to learn those stories and create that connection with them.
And that's interesting because it does kind of lead to a question. I mean, I know other communities do have cultural days, like Stony Plain has a cultural day, and they have everything from Indigenous to farmers using old machinery, right? So, I mean, do we have anything similar in relation to an actual day like that?
I mean, the province has.
Alberta Day.
Well, no, that was the Jason Kenny one-day thing, but.
Oh, yeah, family day.
The Department of Culture has a.
Yeah, so there's Canadian Culture Days and our museum, our heritage sites, African Descendants, Latin Cultural Association, Midship, they all contribute and participate within those Culture Day celebrations. As a singular event that's entirely driven around culture and heritage, no. We don't have that. Do we have examples where all of the groups that you would see in such an event are participating? Absolutely.
Yeah, I just see it just fragmented, but maybe that's necessary. That's all.
Yeah, what's the question?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. There's certainly parts of this I like. The original Founder's Day proclamation, though, was born out of the impact of the 150th celebration. Right? So we just came through celebrating 150 years, oldest unfortified city in Alberta. And then we said, well, we should celebrate this. And so that's how it came about. And that gets lost in the new one, for sure. The one thing I liked about what we're doing now, the wording of the proclamation aside, is that the mayor stood up once a year and said, we're celebrating this. And oh, by the way, we're doing it formally in public by the chief elected official. And that carries weight. It does. Do we need to tell stories differently? Absolutely. Does it need to be more inclusive? For sure. But I think if we have a heritage policy that's driven by the CAO, then council doesn't have any ownership of it anymore. And so from my perspective, if we lose the idea that our chief elected official is going to stand up and we're going to celebrate our community on one day every year, and then we lose the focus. And it'll happen as it happens over the course of the year. And eventually it'll just be subsumed into something else. And we do have something to celebrate. Well, and yeah, we need to start the story a lot earlier than, 1860, whatever it was. And
You remember that?
yeah, pretty close. I was there. And we need to include the stories that, because the people that were in this land 5,000 years ago, they were as much a founder as Father Lacombe. However, when Father Lacombe started, that's when the clock started ticking on St. Albert. And so to me, the story needs to encompass both of those things. But for me, it says something when once a year, the mayor stands up and says, we're going to celebrate this. And I think council needs to own it. With all due respect, Mr. Fletcher, you always run the thing. I mean, we don't operate anything. But to me, council needs to say this is important. And this is going to be a council policy and we're going to pass it, and whatever it needs to be upgraded, modernized, all of those things. But I think if we lose that, then we lose the idea behind it in the first place.
I could just offer a comment. This was not an effort to circumvent or marginalize. This is a council policy.
It's a council policy. That's my question.
100% this belongs to
Why do you
council.
see this as administrative and not council?
Well, so the minute, if you're not proclaiming it, and we say we're going to divest all sort of responsibility to this apart from a piece of paper. We're going to give it to the CEO to make plans around this. Then all we've done is pass a piece of paper. And we're saying we're going to celebrate our heritage, which is great. But that wasn't the intent of the Founder's Day proclamation. We came out of 150, we were proud of it, and say, you know what, we should do this every year. No, by the way, it's going to be the mayor standing up in council saying that we're going to celebrate this. And the minute that stops, the minute the celebration stops.
That's why I asked about the council responsibilities. Maybe we need to pass a motion if this policy gets approved. Secondary stuff. It says provide strategic direction. So we need to make sure that council gives you that strategic direction, because just passing the policy doesn't force us to do that. I think that maybe is a follow-up. And we're getting into, maybe that's not debate, Wes, but I was uncomfortable reading a proclamation that left out people. And that's why in 22, I had such a long preamble to the whole thing, just to talk about what was missing here. We could absolutely do a proclamation every January. But the wording could be different every year. I didn't like the fact that the proclamation was prescribed verbatim. So we could do a proclamation every year annually. Maybe we could even put it in here.
It's,
Recognizes the First Peoples. That recognizes Father Lacombe. I like, you actually talked about military history, and maybe put that in because of our new CAO, but that's a big piece of St. Albert as well that has been significantly not recognized. I can tell you right now, I grew up here. As a Protestant, I felt a little bit excluded because that was the separate school board at the time. And I wasn't Catholic, and St. Albert was still French Catholic. And I was like, we belong here. I felt that, and I grew up here my whole life. So what does that say to people who aren't recognized, you know, beyond just the settlers? So wherever this goes today, because Mike's got a question too, but maybe we need to follow up on how council gets that strategic direction and what kind of events and celebrations we want. That's how I think you keep control of it, Wes.
okay, fair enough.
Mike?
Yeah, so when I read this, Elizabeth, and appreciate all the background, I felt that it was like my birthday. My birthday is a specific day that we set aside, January 14th, 1861.
I was gonna say, is it a Heritage Day, your birthday?
And we celebrate that particular day as a singular event. We could expand that, but we water it down if we start, I believe, we water it down if we start to include, oh, we should celebrate your Irish heritage as well. And we should celebrate your Viking heritage as well in that message. Oh, and we should celebrate your graduation from high school in that message as well. We could include lots of things in that, and I'm absolutely all for inclusivity. However, when I read this was focused on the founding of the community of St. Albert as a particular day, not to exclude anybody else. And, you know, you mentioned, you know, we could include my mom in my birthday and my sisters in my birthday, but this is the birth of St. Albert. And I am very concerned that we lose that focus when we start including all these other things. I would love to see a policy that said, here's Founder's Day, this is it, nice and clean, plus a separate, I don't know, heritage policy that could cover all the things that you talked about. But the way this is written now, and my interpretation of it is, we're losing that single focus by adding a whole bunch of other stuff to it. And I'm personally concerned that this is what we started with, is that good recognition of St. Albert's formal birthday. And we don't want to lose.
So I think, Mike, the problem with what you just said and what the Arts and Heritage Foundation brought to the city is January 14th, 1861 is not Founder's Day. That's the problem. You might see it as the birthday of St. Albert, but there was people here before. And you're discounting that by calling January 14th Founder's Day, because it's not. I think that's the issue that we're struggling with, is what's the definition of our birthday? And I think,
Yeah.
So.
It's a founder of the city, not the land, right?
Well, but the founder of, there's a difference between founding and incorporation. So I think here's some suggestions, and maybe we might not get this done today, Elizabeth. I think we might need to put in a definition of founder. I think we might need to include January 14th, 1861 as an incorporation, but it wasn't incorporated that day, was it? That's just the Staff in the Hill Day, that, like, so maybe just recognize that day in in the policy a definition of founder. But I don't want that to be January 14th. I want that to be what you kind of have it. You said acknowledge that the First Nation culture has always existed. So I think that's where we're struggling is.
I'm struggling with that, absolutely.
But I think what we need to very clearly say is January 14th, 1861 is not Founder's Day. That's what I want to see. But that it is a significant day among many others, but the people around this table, I have a feeling would like to see it in there and maybe others in the community. I'm gonna go to Natalie. She's got her hand up and I'll keep thinking. Go ahead.
I'm happy not having a.
Oh, can't hear you. Oh, I think that's ours. Say something again. There we go.
You can hear me now?
If you
I'm-
do blues music.
I'm totally happy without a prescribed day. I really like the idea of having flexibility in the policy because what we're talking about today and what's important today is not going to be what's important in 4 years. And really, we've seen that even over my 2 terms on council in the last 6 years. What we're talking about is absolutely changed, and our priorities have absolutely changed in terms of acknowledging our history. So I'm quite happy to see that. You know, to Councillor Killick, the adults in my family don't celebrate birthdays. It's not something important. We celebrate each other all the time, kind of when we're available. So a day on a calendar is very culturally specific, I would say, and I don't think it's necessarily required to kind of celebrate the history of a community. So that's kind of where I'm at. I like the flexibility.
When were we incorporated?
1891. It's in the document.
Is it in the?
Yeah.
Which document?
It's in the one you got. It's in the original proclamation.
Oh, that's it. Okay, that's where it is. Okay.
Go down to the original proclamation that identifies it. Sorry.
1904. Yeah.
Yeah.
May I ask?
That's a significant date too that we might want to talk about. Go ahead.
So I was just gonna offer a suggestion. So planning committee, of the whole may direct administration to make changes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Prior to being brought back to council for approval. So I am hearing some common themes about what you potentially might like to see added. So we can draft a motion such that directs administration to bring the policy back redlined to council, that it incorporates some of this feedback.
But do we don't have to be specific in the motion? Can we just say based on the feedback given at standing committee, the whole?
I mean, my preference is to have it more clearly delineated. I think it would also work if we just said as outlined during the discussion. Okay.
Is there any more thoughts and questions?
I don't see a need for eliminating the first policy to do the second policy. Like it's, I really don't.
And I really do. Because that's not it's not the founding of St. Albert, me.
Yeah, I mean, I read the Black Ropes vision and it identified the date of 1861 in
Yeah.
January. But I mean, it was already an
So,
existing,
who wrote that book?
it was an existing community when the bishop and Father Lacombe arrived there, they chose it because it was
Had people here.
it had people and it was at the confluence of river trade and you know, the buffalo hunt and all that. So I mean, but I'm not a historian. I don't want to get into that. But I mean, honestly, had you asked me what day do we celebrate Founder's Day? You know what I wouldn't know it was January 14th. So
Yeah.
I would like to find some way of celebrating it. Like you've identified, not only the founders of the town, what we see, but also how do we recognize the history that existed prior? That's what that's what I'm fighting. So, I mean, maybe it exists in our current policy and a modification of that, but I appreciate that there's a lot of other nuances in it. So I mean, I'm struggling with it. I honestly don't know. And I'm sure you guys were struggling with it when you were sitting around the table trying to identify it. So I don't know. I don't know if I want to make sure we're giving administration enough information to go. Otherwise, we're just gonna come back here and have the same discussion
I
over it.
think the big question truthfully is, do you want a policy focused on a specific event?
Mhm.
Or do you want a policy that more so as it's currently projected about the overall arts and heritage that recognizes specific events?
Mhm.
Those are two very different things, right? The
Mhm.
current one is about a specific event.
Yeah.
Um,
And St. Albert's
want
more
that,
than
then-
just that, right?
If you want it more encompassing, that's fine. And I think there's also a line between the what and the how. Right, the policy defines
Mhm.
sort of recognizing these things. How that's done, I think, is a separate discussion.
Yeah.
Respect those, yeah.
Yeah, that's why I think I will follow up with some sort of motion that says allow council some time to give you that direction and how that looks, whether it's a workshop or maybe some public feedback, which is our next conversation.
I don't
Go
know.
ahead, Wes.
I was gonna say, appreciate the comments about birthdays, but they actually do mean something. You turn 18, you get to vote,
Yeah, that's true.
you get to drink, you get to do all of those things, and you are by our laws.
Wait till you turn 65.
Life is over, no, thinks you are worth anything anymore. You can hear 50 cents off on a
Walmart greeter.
Walmart greeter. But they are worth celebrating when it's 100 and whatever it is now. Perhaps it's not so important. But in 2061, when it's 200, it's going to mean something to our community. And I don't want anybody to hear me say that all of our history is unimportant. What I want to say to us is that there is a day that is important, and we have celebrated it before. And it's might be hokey. Maybe we should do 1904. Maybe we should say we've been here 5,221 years. I don't know what that is, but we have celebrated it in the past. And if we don't want to do it anymore, then let's say that. But I like the idea, quite honestly, Madam Mayor, of you saying this is important in our community and this day we are going to celebrate it. So just my. I'm not sure there was a question in there.
No, I mean, there's been mostly commentary around this one.
Well, I think we're all struggling with the fact that how do we recognize the timeline? And how best to recognize that timeline?
And what events?
And is there a specific event, a specific time? I mean, I'm saying maybe it is like Councilor Bermansky identifies. Maybe we identify the January 14th as the one day, but we also have to have a recognition that there has to be something else, in my opinion. And it would be nice if we could do it together, but at the same time, maybe we can't. I don't know.
If you have a policy that recognizes only one of those days and everything else is not as significant.
I get
So I
that.
think it all needs to be in one policy.
I get that, but I don't know how to, I'm
So
sure that they
maybe,
were.
maybe start a motion that says that,
I don't-
Elizabeth,
Poor Elizabeth.
administration, but Elizabeth. Before this comes to council, or it could come back to committee even, right?
I would
Bring,
let's say that.
that recognizes, certain specific days identified during the conference. So
Yeah.
I could list them, just the two.
Yeah.
Is January 14th, 1861. Which is, what is the right word? It's just the only reason, the only time I've ever seen it is in the Black Robe.
Yeah, it's in Black Robes, yeah.
And again, written by a certain segment of our, and for whatever reason, we've grabbed it and said that's it, but, and maybe our incorporation date. Those are the two that can see right now. Keep the wording about First Nations being here for a long time, whatever it says, like that's good wording, but maybe
Yeah.
acknowledge those two other dates.
Yeah, you could have 1861 as the date the mission was incorporated, the mission.
The mission was established, yeah.
If you're okay with it, I think you could go broader. So
Yeah.
extending those two things perhaps must be included. I would
There might be other ones you guys want. Yeah.
Perhaps a list of key milestones.
Yeah.
Just, that, could be included as an annex or an appendix. There's a bunch of. ways
Timeline,
to
like-
probably structure it
Yeah.
and say, here's what we do, and then
Yeah.
I think that captures.
Yeah.
Just don't include Councilor Killick's birthday, don't.
We only said five.
High school. Yeah. fine.
But you know, there was a day that. There was a day that we were incorporated, there was a day we became a town, there was a day we became a city. Those are all different significant milestones.
And I'm sure there are others that could be
Yeah.
identified through some work with that. And we can come up with a proposed list.
So instead of listing them all, because I think we're getting almost too many now, but it could be, make for an even richer policy to have some. of that.
Is there, does anybody, can I ask?
Yeah.
Is there anybody on, can you, the black robes, and I think it's probably in the book itself. So when we created 1 and 2, was that done as part of the 150 celebration, or was that way before that? It was way before that. So is there any ongoing work in relation to continuing the chronology in relation to, because I think it cut off at a certain time, or is there any value in that? Yeah.
I mean, Arts and Heritage Foundation continues to add to their archives, which would extend.
Yeah, it would be a monumental piece of work
Absolutely.
and maybe totally unnecessary and create more conflict.
And yeah, and as I said, don't forget who wrote the Black Robe. They did not.
Yeah.
I went through it one time trying to find even any reference to some of the first peoples here. That's just not there. Yeah. It's really not.
I read it. I think there was something, but I
You know,
didn't.
you could have the Métis Nation.
Yeah.
Local, right?
Yeah.
An entire history of St. Albert that could be completely different from the Black Robe.
Totally, I agree.
Yeah.
No, I wasn't specifically saying we picked up where the black robes went off. I'm just saying, is there any desire to have? Because that seems to be something that people latch on.
There's a lot of books you could read though.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. You're right. I'm not saying specifically would be a continuation of that. Mine was more interested in continued history, but.
So what do we, Councillor Jolly, go ahead.
Thank you. So as someone who comes from a long line of French Catholic peoples in St. Albert, I own my grandmother's copy of the Black Robe. It's an extremely ethnocentric book. And so I would just be really cautious about leaning on that at all to define our history. And I guess I want to push the point that the idea of dates is absolutely culturally specific to here. You know, everyone here knows that my partner has traveled across the world to be with peoples all over the place. And, you know, yes, here, when you hit 18, you can vote, but, you know, in other places, you know, people become men when they have ceremonies that cut their whole bodies. They become adults when they, you know, cross a range of mountains with their family for the first time. There's so many different ways that we can acknowledge the passage of time and history. You know, when you have your first baby, you know, it's huge in a lot of cultures. And so to be prescriptive about, you know, a particular calendar that is made up, just like everything else is made up, just limits us, I think, in a way that having that flexibility does not. And it doesn't mean to say that we can't celebrate, you know, our day of incorporation and all of those big events, but it just provides that flexibility. So just want to push that point out that those, you know, dates are those change with time and with culture. So just to be open to that.
One other comment I had is that there's lots of dates in our calendar, like our year is filled with dates that we have no problem celebrating, right? And now we're picking one date and saying, well, we aren't going to celebrate this date for whatever reason. And I mean, I just celebrate as much as we can. If you're a person that doesn't want to celebrate, don't celebrate, don't show up. You know, I mean, we celebrate all different cultures in St. Albert. Remembrance Day is, yeah, exactly.
Remembrance Day,
you know,
is a specific day.
it is a specific date, but there's lots of specific days that we
Canada Day
do.
is, why do we celebrate July 1st as Canada Day?
It's just,
Is it just randomly chosen?
no, it was historical.
Alberta Day is a randomly chosen one.
Yeah,
I think so.
It's
Yeah.
Family
July 1st
Day,
is specific.
randomly.
To what?
North America Act.
Yeah.
July 1st is?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
signing of the constitution.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, So what do we have some sort of motion?
But I think there's two issues, right? One is a motion to go back and work this. Marta's identified. The second piece is the current Founder's Day policy. Do you want to leave it in place, which then would require, would
Let's rescind it.
mandate mandate the
Yeah.
proclamation on the 14th of next year? Or do you want to rescind it? You could still read a proclamation that could be rewritten that together if that was the desire, but that.
If we don't rescind it, I have to read that proclamation, though, right? So why don't we rescind it, but we could put a motion that another proclamation is brought forth for sometime in January to start off the new year. Not to celebrate that
We have to.
January 14th, but to start off the new year. When do you think we might get this work done? Probably not for January 3rd. Right. Yeah. I'm thinking many things, right? Okay.
Okay.
Do you have something to share with us?
Yeah, we have two motions
Okay.
here. So one is with respect to the current one and asking administration to prepare a new proclamation for January 24. And then the second one has to do with bringing back the new policy to SCOW by a certain date and time with some key milestones and dates is what we've said. And
Just want to make sure they have some direction. That's all.
that can bring it back in Q1.
And I'm just, we're leaving them.
I guess.
I don't know if I'm supposed to.
Okay. Like, okay. I'm fine with that, as long as Elizabeth, it's not just about the key milestones and dates, it's
Do include key definitions.
acknowledging all these things along our timeline that contributed to St. Albert. It's not about dates on our timelines.
And may I ask a clarifying question? Would it also be having, despite the policy is written to sort of expand the opportunities, but of where and when we celebrate, having a specific point at the start of the year to really talk about the city as it's on its incorporation sort of journey, to sort of kick things off, but not having the language in here, but just that the mayor will start the year by recognizing what's come before.
Yeah,
And I could almost see that day in January announce.
don't forget that
February's Black History Month, and don't forget
that April's Poet Laureate Month, like,
and then maybe even we identify some plans for that year, right? It's a good way to start the year. I like that.
Wes,
Be happy to make the motions.
Okay,
so
is there,
I just want to make sure everybody's got their,
I just don't, I'm floundering here. I don't understand. I don't know whether we're giving administration the information that, I mean, we've had a lot of conversations, we've had a lot of, I just worry that we're just not giving it. I'm confused. Like, are we stopping the proclamation on, January 14th?
it says right there.
Yeah, I know, but a new proclamation for January 2024, but we're just saying January 2024. So by that means we're not doing it January 14th.
Tell you right now, I barely do it on the 14th because it doesn't fall on a council meeting.
Okay, fair enough,
It's
fair
all
enough.
over. Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think, I just think we've either A, made it too broad, to provide adequate direction, or maybe not broad enough to let you play within that guideline that will allow you to come back with something that we can actually see. And because I'm getting a sense that there are some saying, keep it as is, just do a little bit more. And then I'm getting some saying, no, get rid of it all and come back with something other that recognizes more of what's below. So I'm struggling. I'm struggling because I don't have an alternative right now either that would have.
Do you want to ask Elizabeth if she feels like she has direction?
Yeah, well, but this gives her specific direction,
Okay.
but I don't think that's what they want. Anyway, sorry, I don't know whether administration, I mean, that certainly goes against what administration has in here, in my opinion. I don't know. I'm just struggling, you guys, so.
What you'll see, I think broadly, please correct me, is that. So, right, will be policy similar to what is this, perhaps with some clarifying definitions. But then a list of, and I'm not gonna say dates, I say a list of milestones.
Yeah.
That will include some dates.
Yeah.
That are things that
Like
council should consider in terms of recognition, whether those get incorporated into Rainmaker Rodeo or it's a specific standalone
Yeah.
item. That's the how again, that I think is council can debate and determine. I think that's kind of what you see, right? As opposed to if you want the founder's policy as it currently exists, that's not what that motion is going to trigger for us.
Right, no, because we're, yeah.
Should we not have the word rescind removed out of there until we can see what's going to replace the current policy? Like, how can we
Yeah.
rescind it and guarantee we'll be happy with what comes forward?
You
Yeah.
can't,
Yeah.
I guess the issue with the current policy is that it mandates the mayor to read the proclamation.
That's what I mean.
We want to have a proclamation that is worded better than the one that is in this policy. That's, it is strange that that a proclamation was included in a policy, and we should have a policy to never do that again.
We have a lot of.
Because things change.
You read proclamations all the time.
And they're rewritten every year.
Okay.
So every time I do a Black History Month proclamation, it's rewritten,
Okay.
right? To reflect that, what's going on that.
Anyways, I'm interrupting what Councilor Broadhead had.
Yes, I thought you had more questions.
Well, I just,
Yeah, I'd met-
struggling. I'm just,
Well,
I'm,
Why don't you, I'll accept the motion and I'll let you.
Okay.
yeah, maybe, but I mean, maybe your comments will clarify like it always does.
He does.
don't put any pressure on. Well, let me read it in and then you can accept it.
Okay,
If you wish, Madam Mayor. That the Standing Committee of the Whole recommend to Council that policy C-CC 18 St. Albert Founder's Day be rescinded and that administration prepare a new proclamation for January 2024. That administration amend policy C-CC 24 St. Albert Heritage Recognition attached to the agenda report dated November 14, 2023 to include key milestones, dates, and definitions and bring it back to the Standing Committee of the Whole for consideration in Q1 of 2024.
can I ask one quick question before I accept that? Marta, can you amend a policy that hasn't been approved?
Yes, because we're here to ask for feedback. So it will be it's directed us to bring it back here instead of to council for ultimate approval.
But yeah, maybe that administration amend proposed policy C. It's just, yeah, it looks like that's already a policy, the way that's written. So it's a proposed policy. Okay.
Yes.
Are you okay with that, Wes?
Absolutely.
All right, now I'll accept it. Go ahead, Wes.
Okay, well, from my perspective, Madam Mayor, council actually asked administration to take back this
Yeah,
policy. And so what they've done is they've suggested that the current policy as it written doesn't accurately reflect what we as a community want to say in recognition of our own birthday, if you will, to use our culturally acceptable term. So that we need to rescind because we don't want to say those words. The current policy compels you to say
Prescriptive,
those
yeah.
words. It's very prescriptive.
Okay.
So that's the first part of the motion. The second part of the motion is simply to ask administration to come back based on our conversation today to come up with a different policy in relation to heritage recognition and that to include key dates, definitions, and then we'll review it as a council again in Q1. I think if we can do this right rather than fast, perhaps that's the best way to go forward. I firmly support the idea of expanding what we're saying. My own personal opinion is that in our culture, we celebrate birthdays. And let's not lose that. And I certainly don't want to lose the idea that the chief elected official for our city stands up and says, this community has been around for a long, long, long time. And we're going to celebrate the fact that we've been around for a long, long, long time. yeah, it might be a little hokey. I'll tell you what, it means something. Anyway, my opinion and my vote.
Anyone else on debate?
Do we have to vote?
Szymanski?
I'd like to split them if I could, because
Okay.
I'm not comfortable with the rescind word in the first and the second, and I'm accepting those.
Okay. So we'll just debate the first part of it then. Anyone else? Yeah, Councillor Jolly, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Mary, you really did a good job of explaining why this policy needs to go. You know, when even the mayor's uncomfortable kind of reading it verbatim, that's a problem. So I'm happy to see a new proclamation be put together.
Mike, go ahead.
Can I just clarify then that by rescinding this current policy as it's worded, which when it goes through all the history, First Nations gathering place for at least 5,000 years, or is that what we're saying we're going to get rid of? And then we're going to rewrite something else? The policy that I'm reading in CC 18. It has all that history in there, and I'm confused why we would rescind it.
The policy says that January 14th is recognized as Founder's Day.
Yeah.
That's the policy statement, and
That's where I'm uncomfortable.
it's not Founder's Day because we were here before January 14th, 1861.
That's why I would like to rescind this one.
And then you're right, there's pieces and Elizabeth, me and Melissa and Christina, who generally write all the proclamations, you and probably HF, we could come up with, can I say, a kick-ass proclamation? Like, we could probably include a lot of this in there, but just make sure that it seems to the fact that we are the oldest non-fortified community in Alberta. That's the exciting and unique part about St. Albert. It's not about that date. That's what we would work to proclaim. And honestly, guys, so if you want to see the proclamation before I read it, that's fine too.
But you could even provide input.
That's why we have to rescind it. Otherwise, I'm stuck with this.
And last year when they asked,
When Arts and Heritage asked us not to read it, I really couldn't, because it's in policy. So I had to.
Why do you have to rescind it? Why can't they just bring forward the new choice and then you decide at that point if you rescind the old?
Because you're not going to have this done by January 14th now. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
So, because this directs administration for a new proclamation, it doesn't direct them, part of the policy identified a proclamation, but all of the actual policy goes to what Councillor Killick was talking about around so what I'm confused about is we're eliminating policy, but we're giving direction to develop a proclamation, not come back with a new policy until we get down to the next Heritage
Well, I think-
Foundation.
yeah,
So that's the concerning thing I have with the motion. I mean, one, we're asking rescind policy, but give your specific direction around a wording of a proclamation.
It doesn't say give direction on a wording of the proclamation.
Well, prepare a new proclamation.
Because we don't want to
implies
lose the
that.
fact that we do a proclamation in January. We don't want to lose that, so we're putting it in motion. We don't have to put that in motion, but now that it's there.
Okay, I'm just seeing such a difference.
We'll have a proclamation for sure. That ensures it does happen.
But one part of that policy is that we have a proclamation, correct?
see,
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
CC
that's really
18
all it is.
is all, it's just, yeah, okay. Okay. All right, I mean, that's where I'm,
Claim, it doesn't say you have to.
There you go. Yeah.
I don't know. Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
Hughes, you
Sorry.
been quiet?
I just had a pause. I just had a question, that's all.
Sorry, Ken, are you done or no?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so. I'm
Okay.
obviously confused today.
It's okay. It's okay. I wasn't sure I didn't want to interrupt you if you were still wanting to say something. But I think the one thing is that if we're gonna not have it as be a day, then we shouldn't say Founder's Day. Like the policy says Founder's Day, so it should actually be recognized, just like if you're gonna recognize your birthday, like Councillor Bud had said, then it has to actually be a day. So I'm not if we're actually gonna change the whole thing, we actually need to change the scope of the actual name of the policy, because if we're gonna just, I mean, that's the challenge. And I realize, Mayor, that we had, people were here before it officially was incorporated as a town, or said, here, we're gonna start this and make it recognized, but people were everywhere before something started. So, you know, I mean, before Canada started, before anything, there was still something, but we still recognize Canada Day, even though there was people here before Canada was officially said, we're gonna start Canada. So, but we still have a day. So if we're not gonna actually have it be like recognizing it as like a birth date, then we should rename it, I guess would be what I say is, I don't know. I feel like we're discussing this a lot, and I don't know if we actually have just made things worse through our discussion and more confusing than it would be if we just had a different discussion altogether, because we're trying to discuss a birth date, and then we're also trying to discuss it as a larger thing. And I don't know, if I was Elizabeth right now, I would have absolutely no idea where to go with this policy right now, I think is the challenge. But the other thing and this is my question to you, Mayor, I understand you're uncomfortable about presenting it as is, but the policy never said specifically what had to be said in the proclamation, correct?
Yeah, it does.
So it does, it actually says you must say these words.
Yeah.
It says,
It says may, it does say may, but the proclamation is prescriptive in the policy, the wording of it.
I see. Okay. Okay. I don't know. I'm so confused now. I'm gonna join you, Ken, in being absolutely confused with what's going on.
Good, there's a lot of room on this bus.
Okay, well, great. Just move over.
Councillor Jolly, do you have anything on debate?
I already entered debate and left it.
Okay, so I think everybody's gone on debate now. Just the first piece. I'll add my thoughts that I'm glad to see CC 18 gone. Hopefully. I'm looking forward to a new proclamation. Just really quickly to address Councillor Hughes's comments about not calling it Founder's Day. The proposed policy is called St. Albert Heritage Recognition. It's not about a single day. It's about recognizing everything that contributed to St. Albert. But I'll get to that part when we do the second piece of the motion. But honestly, guys, I think you've heard me say 1,000 proclamations, maybe not quite that many, but the staff does a really good job of getting the words right almost every time. Like I never have to even interject with what Christina and Melissa put together for proclamations. And I think I'm excited about what we could do in January of 24 if they had the flexibility to not go with this prescribed proclamation in C18. So I think we should rescind it. Councillor Broadhead to close.
Well, the rescission of this policy is actually the direction of council to come back with new recommendations around how to deal with this particular activity. And if we don't rescind it, we're still bound by what is written. I mean, that's the nature of governance. You know, policy drives behavior. So if we don't want to say that, then let's rescind this and move on and come up with a statement in January that meets our needs, and then give Elizabeth enough time and her team to come up with a policy based on our comments today.
All right, call for the vote. So that is Councillor Broadhead, myself, Mackay, and then I don't see the online ones. Natalie's in favor. Is Councillor Hughes in favor?
Yeah.
Okay, and so that's 4 with Councillor Killick and Councillor Hughes and Bermansky opposed. Second piece of this, Councillor Broadhead, you've already said your debate arguments, but now that we've split it, do you have anything else?
Just what I just finished saying, Madam Mayor.
Okay. All right, so we've rescinded C18. So if anyone else have any comments on this? Go ahead, Councillor Jolly.
Thank you. So St. Albert has more policies than everybody else in the province, I believe, possibly in the country. And we don't need a policy for every single proclamation, every single celebration. So I'd be quite happy. I'm voting against this because I'd be quite happy just to have one less policy that we need to review every 4 years. That doesn't mean that we can't celebrate everything. We already do celebrate a lot of things that are not in policy. So I think this is an opportunity to work on our reputation for having more policies than everyone else.
Do we have that reputation? Anyone else on debate? I totally, I get what you're saying, Councillor Jolly. We don't need this. And I thought about that when I read it. I'm like, do we really need this? Because we're doing it anyway. But I think this kind of having it in policy does two things. It does, especially if we come back with some of the milestones, will serve as a guiding document for anyone to look at about what stages led us to who we are today. And, if something else happens in the future, we'd have to add that milestone to the policy, but this would be a record. And I like the fact that it kind of binds us to taking time out of our busy lives and asking administration through strategic direction from council to plan events and to read a proclamation potentially and to what is it called? Recognize our culture and our heritage. Recognize our heritage. So I don't mind having that in a policy. Of all the policies, that's a good one to have. So. Anything to close, Councillor?
Yes, couldn't agree with you more, Madam Mayor. In our community, heritage and our history and how we celebrate it is very important to our community, and we need to do it right. I wouldn't say it's a hot topic, but it's it is a item of interest to most people in our community, only because St. Albert has such a rich and diverse history. And they're proud of it, to your point, and we just need to do it right so it's inclusive of everybody. Without losing, our celebratory options, if you will. So anyway, just my thoughts.
Okay, call for the vote. So that's Councillor Killick, Councillor Mackay, Broadhead, Mayor Herron, and Sheena, or Councillor Hughes in favor, and Councillor Romansky and Councillor Jolly opposed. Okay, let's take a break.
Lunch.
Is it lunchtime? It's 12:01, perfect timing. So how about a half an hour, Sheena and Natalie, is that good? Okay. Councillor Hughes, Councillor Jolly, you back?
Share your screen and turn on your camera, but you don't on your mic. So that, right? I understand.
Councillor Hughes? Councillor Jolly?
Yes. Here. Make sure.
Okay, so we'll start the meeting with Councillor Jolly not here and then just kind of log her in when she gets here. So we are on the public participation policy, and we have Brian with us and Paul.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll just
have new faces sometimes.
Well, and I just wanted to quickly introduce Brian. I know a couple of you have met him before, talking about special days earlier. This is a special day. It's Brian's first chance to present to council, and we're excited to have him.
So we'll mark this on his calendar and celebrate it every year. Every year, the anniversary of when I spoke to council for the first time.
Yeah, he's been with us since April, and we're doing a really great job. We're really pleased to present this to council today. So I'm just going to turn over to Brian to walk things through, and away we go.
Awesome, thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Public participation embodies the principles of inclusivity, transparency, and accountability, empowering our community to have a voice in decisions that shape our city. Today, we discussed the importance of public participation and the council's vital role in shaping policies that enhance our community's well-being. Your guidance ensures we create a practical public participation framework reflecting our residents' aspirations. As we delve into the amendments of the proposed public participation policy, it's crucial to recognize the robust foundation upon which these changes stand. We draw inspiration from the International Association of Public Participation, IAP2, whose principles serve as our guiding light. These principles encapsulate the essence of meaningful and effective public engagement, and today I'd like to underscore a few key aspects. Firstly, measurable objectives. In aligning with best practices, we prioritize setting clear and measurable goals. This strategic approach not only allows us to gauge the effectiveness of our initiatives, but also empowers us to assess and report our progress comprehensively across the entire city. Moving forward, the principles of monitoring and evaluation take center stage. We recognize the dynamic nature of public engagement, and to ensure its continual improvement, we commit to regular assessments and adjustments in our strategies. This adaptive approach ensures that we stay responsive to changing circumstances, fostering an environment of continuous enhancement. Equally important is the principle of documentation. Transparency and accountability are the cornerstone of our engagement process. By maintaining thorough records, we not only uphold these principles, but also provide a clear narrative of our commitment to inclusive decision-making. Lastly, the significance of discerning when engagement is truly necessary. We aim to steer clear of mere checkbox public engagement, avoiding costly and ineffective participation initiatives. Our focus remains on ensuring that every instance of engagement is not just a procedural formality, but a meaningful interaction that adds genuine value to the decision-making process. In essence, these amendments echo our dedication to implementing practices that transcend more compliance and instead embed the spirit of authentic, purposeful engagement at the core of our civic endeavors. These Canadian municipalities have excelled in public participation and are recognized in IAP2's International Core Value Awards reports. Their expertise has dramatically influenced the amendments to the public participation policy. The amended public participation policy is firmly grounded in the IAP2 core values for public participation, recognized globally as the pinnacle in involving the public in decision-making. These core values are now seamlessly woven into our policy. First, the right to be involved. At the heart of public participation is the fundamental belief that those affected by a decision inherently possess the right to be involved in the decision-making process. 2, influence on decisions. It's not merely about presence. Our policy ensures that public participation goes beyond symbolism. It includes the commitment that the public's contribution will genuinely influence the decision-making process. 3, sustainability through inclusivity. Recognizing and communicating the needs and interests of all participants, including decision makers, ensures that our decisions are sustainable and inclusive. 4, facilitating involvement. Actively seeking and facilitating the involvement of those potentially affected or interested in a decision is a cornerstone of our approach. 5, empowering through input. Public participation, as per our policy, empowers participants by giving them a say in how they engage, in the process recognizing their potential to make a meaningful difference. 6, access to information. We commit to providing participants with the necessary information to participate meaningfully, fostering an environment of transparency and informed decision-making. And 7, communicating impact. Our policy ensures that participants are not left in the dark. They deserve to know how their valuable input has directly influenced the final decision. In essence, these core values are not just principles on paper. They are the guiding lights of our commitment to a robust, inclusive, and impactful public participation process. These core values guide our commitment to authentic and genuine public participation. In our commitment to implementing the core values of public participation, we plan to introduce a public participation framework that utilizes templates to align P2 initiatives across the organization. One, the decision mapping template is a transformative tool that goes beyond outlining the decision-making process. It acts as our compass, guiding us to determine when public engagement is not only advisable, but genuinely needed. This systematic approach scrutinizes every facet of a decision, weighing potential impact, stakeholders, and context. With the decision mapping, we ensure that our engagement efforts are focused and purposeful. Much like decision mapping is our internal compass, ensuring our community comprehends the distinct layers of public participation and the legal obligations linked to public input is equally vital. Raising awareness and educating our community about these differences must become a top priority. It's about navigating internally and ensuring our community understand the intricacies of public participation. Additionally, we note learnings from the IAP2 award-winning Halifax Regional Municipalities P2 process. What's intriguing about their approach is the potential for administration to reference extensive past engagements when considering initiatives that align with their scope. So rather than initiating fresh rounds of engagement, this approach demonstrates a commitment to long-term planning. It also helps reduce the need for ongoing continuous engagement, which could lead to engagement fatigue or checkbox engagement. However, it's essential to acknowledge that periodic updates with extensive consultation will be integrated into their process, ensuring it remains relevant and responsive. This dual strategy combines long-term planning with periodic rejuvenation to create a balanced approach to public participation. As we navigate the path forward and contemplate the amendments to our public participation policy, our compass is set firmly on transparency and compliance. In our pursuit, our foremost goal is to build and maintain trust within our community, adapting to the dynamic landscape of public participation. Crucially, we recognize the delicate balance required. We must align our practices with legal requirements, avoiding the pitfall of going beyond what legislation mandates. Transparency is our guiding principle, and we understand the significance of setting expectations that are not only clear, but also trustworthy. We are committed to being mindful, avoiding overpromising or soliciting input that we cannot act upon. We understand that while transparency and goodwill are paramount, insincere engagement can lead to community frustration, as we see with the CI sometimes. In our meticulous planning, we are resolute in not exceeding legislative requirements. Our aim is to establish transparent and trustworthy expectations, respecting the precarious time our community invests in participating. Delving into our engagement methods, we acknowledge the evolving landscape. While traditional in-person meetings hold undeniable value, we also recognize the imperative of inclusivity. Therefore, our approach embraces a fusion of in-person and online methods. Virtual engagement offers accessibility, empowering residents to participate at their convenience. Yet, we are acutely aware that virtual participation may not be feasible for everyone. Hence, our commitment extends to providing options for those who prefer the richness of in-person engagement. Our plans orbit around the principles of compliance, inclusivity, and the nurturing of community trust. The key changes to our public participation policy are aimed at enhancing responsiveness, effectiveness, and accountability. Firstly, we're expanding our policy's purpose, committing explicitly to a consistent and well-coordinated approach across all city departments. This foundational step, which will be outlined in the upcoming administrative directive, is pivotal for a more responsive and accountable public participation process. It enables us to systematically assess and evaluate our methods, ensuring alignment and data-driven decision-making. Additionally, we're emphasizing effective consultation, involvement, collaboration, and empowerment processes. We recognize these facets as crucial to meaningful public participation, aligning with the Municipal Government Act and other legislation forming the backbone of our work. Now let's delve into the revamped public participation spectrum, condensed into 4 categories: advise, refine, create, and decide. 1, advise. The city informs and invites the public to provide feedback on policies, programs, or projects, for example, budget priorities or offering perspectives on park renovations. 2, refine. The city informs and actively involves the public in collaborative refinement, seen in such activities like street redesign workshops or policy workshops. 3, create. The city informs and collaborates with the public to create solutions, as seen in projects like community gardening initiatives or youth center planning. And 4, decide. The public is informed and given decision-making authority, participating directly or through committees for projects such as neighborhood improvements or voting. Our commitment to transparency and accessibility is championed by our communications and public affairs branch, ensuring our community is well-informed and engaged in public participation endeavors. Now, we're streamlining engagement by removing the informed category. This simplification enhances accessibility for the public and decision makers, emphasizing active participation in all categories. This strategic move allows us to allocate resources efficiently, aligning with best practices endorsed by the International Association of Public Participation. This change empowers our community to have a more significant say in shaping the city's future, focus on active involvement, influence, and impact. Information sharing remains fundamental through all participation categories, eliminating redundancy and consolidating it as a core responsibility of this administration. Understanding that public participation initiatives extend beyond inform, we assure you that elements like reports, evaluations, facilitation, and engagement, and transparency continue to be integral to our commitment. Our proposal to remove inform is not a reduction in our commitment to information sharing, but a strategic refinement. It ensures our community remains well-informed and actively participates in decision-making, reinforcing our dedication to transparency, engagement, and data-driven choices. These changes empower us to engage our community in more organized, effective, and data-driven manner. A pivotal addition to our public participation policy that empowers both the City Council and our administration is the incorporation of the results section. This addition holds immense significance for several key reasons. 1, better representation. It provides us with a powerful tool to understand our community's interests, values, and perspectives more comprehensively. This deeper understanding enables us to be more effective representatives of the diverse voices within our city. 2, identifying impactful engagement areas. With this new element, we now have the means to precisely pinpoint where public participation can have a meaningful impact on our policies, programs, and the decisions made by the council. This targeted approach ensures that our engagement efforts are strategic and purposeful. Promoting engagement. We can now actively guide the public towards engagement activities that align with their interests and concerns. This proactive approach promotes a more inclusive and participatory community. 4, incorporating public input. The updated policy places a greater emphasis on thoughtfully considering public input. It reinforces our commitment to valuing and integrating the insights and perspectives shared by our community members. 5, balancing expectations and resources. We are acutely aware of the need to balance public engagement expectations with the constraints of our resources and fiscal realities. This addition ensures a realistic and sustainable approach to public participation in the long term. 6, transparency. We have set a new standard for clear communication. As we move forward, we commit to transparently communicating how public input influences our recommendations to City Council and the decision-making process. This transparency builds trust and reinforces our commitment to an open and accountable governance. These changes are not just procedural, they are transformative. They enhance our commitment to meaningful public participation, ensuring that the community's voice is not only heard, but is also effectively integrated into our decisions. We approach this with a realistic understanding of our resources, ensuring that public participation remains sustainable and practical in the long term. As we approach the conclusion of today's discussion, I express my sincere gratitude for the opportunity to address this esteemed council on public participation. Thank you for your time, attention, and unwavering commitment to the well-being of the city of St. Albert.
Well, that was an excellent presentation. Speaking of public feedback, we just got the budget ones, 124 pages.
It's a lot of reading for council.
It's all the individual.
Individual
responses. You could skip through those and then it's the exact summary.
But that's good. I mean, 119 people responded. So that was good.
Hi.
It was a little bit lower.
Lower.
Than we have in the past. However, it was more targeted in terms of people had to register to provide their comments. In the past, it was unregistered, so anyone 5-6 times.
Talked a bit about in-person public engagement. The World Cafes that we used to do were the best budget public engagement council could ever have. So I'd love to see that come back. But anyway, I'm open up to questions. Councillor Hughes already has her hand up.
Yeah, I just had maybe a quick one. I like the document and you did a really good job presenting everything. So I can tell you put a lot of effort into it. The question I have is, we have a lot of in-person, we just had one, for example, with the LUB. And is there an intention to have an opportunity to, in addition to having the in-person, whatever it is, whether it's the feedback or information, then just put online as a standard for easy reference and people could actually submit their comments that way as well as a double entry? Is that are we already doing this? I'm not aware of it, or is there an intention to do it? Because I think it would actually increase the public participation a lot more for those people who don't attend online but happen to see it, that they actually then could provide that feedback. Like I look at the one challenge that we had with the high rises that were just approved. One resident was in attendance and everybody else wasn't even aware that this was occurring because they didn't show up in person. So if there was a standard where you had to be done in person, but also had to have a follow-up online for however long period of time, at least for the survey results to come back for feedback, I think it might allow us to actually get a greater number of responses. So I'm just going to ask, where are we at with that?
I do believe the LUBs on Cultivate the Conversation, is it? For sure.
Mhm.
It's online already. Yeah. I don't know. Did you have more to answer to that?
Quite, yes. The short answer is yes. I don't know where to look.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, the short answer is yes. That's back to the point about combining traditional versus inclusive engagement and acknowledging both have their advantages and disadvantages. That is going to be a really deliberate part of the decision mapping when we work with departments on designing their helping them design their approach. So short answer, yes.
And
I think that'd be a
Councillor
huge
Hughes,
improvement.
Councillor Hughes, the high rises in Ville-Giroux were also online. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know how we get that out to the public so they can be more aware of that happening, because it's one thing to say it's on our website or 2 billion pages, another thing for the public to actually think, hey, this is actually relevant to me. I actually do want to look into this. And so I don't know how we get the word out effectively, because if you just say there's like a change on this property, most people are like, okay, they don't actually know what the significance of the change is, and all of our public announcements don't actually provide those details. So if we are going to do that, I think that the changes you're making are looking really good. Paulette, I forgot your name. I'm so sorry, but
Frank.
Both of you, Frank, I think the changes are really, really good. But I think that's if we aren't already doing it, I think that's the other thing. And the other thing I was thinking of is if we did it online, I don't know about the time commitment, but if it's possible if there's slides that may be confusing to people, to have somebody like do a 30-second or less explanation of what this means. If we look at it and go, we don't know what this is, instead of just having the slides up, if we had it like, if you want more information, click the video, and then somebody says, this is what it means. Again, then that'll allow people who weren't there in person to actually have a little bit of feedback that they would have received had they been there in person. And it allows them to not make assumptions just based on a drawing or any other piece of information on there. So just a suggestion, but I just thought that would actually help people perhaps be more, I don't know what the response rate will be. I just think the big thing is actually letting people know that not only that it exists, but why it'd be relevant to them, and then making sure that they know that they can also go to that in person. Because it's in the Cultivate Conversation, you said for LUB, for example, but how many people actually know that? So if they thought about it or anything like that, that would be, and also, I guess when I talk about the relevance, and I'll stop talking, but when I talk about the relevance, if we just said there's LUB, that's one thing. If we said LUB and here's some key points that we're looking at, like a summary of 3 or 4 bullet points, then again, it tells the people whether or not they actually want to further investigate or not. So Cause I think of LUB and most people just, their eyes glaze over. So they don't even know. They're thinking, I got better things to do, anything with the bachelor's on or something. And as we said, these are the key points that we're looking at, plus more, then they can say, okay, should I investigate further or not? So, just something of that nature, I think would be helpful, but I do really like what you guys have put forward. So that was it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mike?
Just a general comment. I participated in both the in-person session with Councillor Broadhead and Councillor McKay were there for LUB, and it was really good. And I also did the online survey, which did have questions, and you could click directly to the link of that particular slide in the document. And I think they worked really well, because I found myself toggling back and forth as I went from question to kind of background info. So I did send a note to Adrian that I thought it was a very well laid out survey, and hopefully lots of residents look at that. But the question was around on page, I think it's 48. Why are we moving to from 2 years to 4 years for the large satisfaction survey? And then just maybe it's a housekeeping question, I don't know, but item 6 is stroked through in dark, and then it's re-added as item 9 with no changes to the wording in red. So I just why that is there, but maybe the first question is why changing from 2 to 4 years?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Killick. So the second one is really easy to answer. It was a question of just flow of the document and timing. So we moved that paragraph just down so that document flows a bit better and makes sense. As far as the community satisfaction survey, Brian alluded to participation burnout and the lack of or the challenge of having meaningful input and participation activities. With all of the other things we are doing, including the census and ongoing budget public participation, and we'll be coming back to council to talk a bit more about that process in the new year and how we make that more effective. Strategically, it's best placed to do that every 4 years in line with the council strategic plan. So that's our thinking around that.
There's also council direction to put forward.
Yeah, it was a few years ago.
Well,
Yeah, it was.
that one.
You'd have to revisit that when you have a motion to.
Okay. Fair enough.
But take due credit for that. The experts.
Well, that was a simple answer.
People do we have registered on Cultivate the Conversation? Do we know?
Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you. I more than happy to get back to you.
Yeah, wouldn't mind. Just
a couple.
doesn't have to be a formal council inquiry or anything, just, yeah. Because that seems to be our go-to space now for online, and I know you have to register, which is good, so you don't have the anonymousness. I guess you still get it, but. Yeah, it'd be nice to know that number. Go ahead.
Thanks. Thank you for your presentation. I have a question with items that you collect data on like a long time ahead of when it actually comes to council. Like some of the presentations, that were presented to public could be several months, or a year earlier. And then all of a sudden it's on council's plate and, neighborhoods that, maybe affected wouldn't have any knowledge of it. So do you ever give that last call kind of thing? Like when it's coming up to the, in council, like this is affecting these neighborhoods, on council plate, 2 weeks from now or something like that. So that people can go to the website and get that information, because I feel like it's kind of hidden the further back it goes. And then it's surprise, it's at council and, oh, we talked about that a year ago. So.
Great question. Thank you very, very much for asking that. The departments themselves and their projects that are responsible for how they get the word out to their particular group of stakeholders. So every project is different. When it comes to land use bylaw or ASPs, in addition to the legal requirements, they also, our colleagues have methods that they use to get that out. So we don't have one rule for every project that goes ahead. It really does depend on the project and who the stakeholders are and what the legal requirements are. We do, and that's one of the things in the results section is ensuring that there is as much transparency as possible and that residents know what is being asked, why it's being asked, and what's going to be done with that information. So there's no easy answer to that question beyond kind of depends on the project and the requirements for each project.
Okay, so the legal requirements, I mean, you advertise in the newspaper, right? At what point in time would that be advertised? Like, say it's coming to council, would you have an ad near to when it's coming to council or not?
So I can jump in. Yep. It has to be before second reading. It has to be 2 weeks of, it's right before. It's usually the 3 or 4 weeks right before the first ad will go out and then the second one the following week. So it's within a couple weeks of the item coming to council.
Okay, could you describe to me, I mean, I don't even read it, ads most of the time, but like how big is it? Is it a small ad? Would it even draw anyone's attention kind of thing?
So Cheryl is better.
It's actually a full.
Yeah, it's full page.
Okay.
And it gives all the details for the public hearing. It says when, where, why, how, if you want to put in written, if you want to come to do a presentation, like it's the whole thing that is part of the procedure bylaw. The schedule, I want to say schedule after the procedure bylaw. On the council says everything.
Okay, and that would be a couple weeks, also the council date.
The
that
first one
it's
goes 3 weeks ahead, then the second
Okay.
one is 2 weeks ahead, and then there's one full week, clear week. And then the council, then the public hearing. So they get, it's pretty quick, like they're.
Right.
And then it's repeated, I would say too, because we also post the agenda,
Yeah, that's
Right?
right. So it's
So,
in the agenda
yeah.
2 weeks.
which is not required by the province. We just do
I
it.
just do that.
Yeah.
And plus it's the ad and the agenda report and all the information is on the website also. On the first date of the ad, the agenda report, all the information is on the website and it's directed through to the public hearing page on the website.
So when someone tells me they didn't know about the public hearing, you're saying that they'll get a full page ad in
Oh, there's
every case right before?
We don't do a notification, but it's in the Gazette under city lights, yeah, but there's no notification being mailed out, no.
Isn't there big billboards too?
Did we put up public hearings?
Like if there's a subject piece of land that's going through a redistricting,
Aren't we required to put a sign up on the site as well?
They're not required to, no.
we do?
We're not required. I think there's signs sometimes that say what is gonna be here.
R1 to R4 or whatever, yeah.
I don't know if that's very consistent.
Okay. Remember seeing them.
I think planning, if I can, I think planning does this when they do public consultation outside, public engagement outside of.
It's Adrian. Adrian, do you have an answer to that one?
There he is.
Yes, when there are parcel specific applications, we consistently have a sign that is posted on site in addition to the ads in the paper and our attempts through social media to engage people.
Thank you.
Consistently, he said.
Very consistently, we require it.
Thank you.
I have an additional question.
Go ahead, Mike.
Just section on page 45, again, in the red line type, it said allowing the public to decide, decision-making authority for policies, program, project, and services. And it gives local governance, be a committee of citizens, authority to make decisions on behalf of the city regarding specific local policies and initiatives. Could you give me some examples of what that means exactly?
So some examples could be neighborhood improvements, initiatives.
That's above, that's the part above it.
Yeah.
So what, the piece below it, local governance committee.
This can be like voting. You can also look at things where I think we have a arts and history committee where they decide on what art's gonna go up. So it really depends on certain aspects that council has given authority to these bodies to have the final decision. And it's not everywhere they would have, right? It's just prescribed in their mandate.
So public art is a prime example of something that could fit under that.
Okay.
Wes.
Sort of a similar question. So input, so I'll reference this is page 44, and it's open and informative, providing the public with clear, unbiased, and accessible information about the outcomes of public participation activities. So the success of public participation is often in the eye of the beholder, right? And so if you offer this opportunity for public participation, sometimes it's the loudest voice, but even the loudest voice may not represent the will of the community. So I'm just wondering how you balance that with the idea that they actually have input into decisions. Maybe I'm not being very clear, but.
Maybe I could start and then I'll defer to the experts. I think, first off, don't ask a question you don't want the answer to, right?
Right.
I think second is, don't ask questions where you don't care what the answer is, right? And so that goes back to the meaningful component of this. Because someone has offered the opportunity, and I think to comment means that will be factored into decision-making. It doesn't mean that it will be the decision. And so I think, please correct me if I'm going astray here, but there's two things. One is upfront, stating why we're asking folks their opinion, right? What that information will be used at. And then after the fact, in many cases, there's utility to say, this was the decision, right? Informed by all these components, right? And so that loud, shrill voice, or could be even just a number, you get varying opinions. Not all those opinions will see themselves necessarily in the final decision, but they'll all have been considered by this body to make a deliberate decision. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, it does. And I guess what went through my mind when I was doing this, reviewing this, was the public hearing on Riverbank Landing, where there was,
Sorry, Mayor, it looks like online's been muted.
We good, Sean?
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah. What do you mean online's been muted?
Sheena just nodded as well. His voice stopped.
Say something, Wes.
well, that might not be such a bad thing.
Can you hear us now?
Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Okay. So I was just wondering when you say that they're going to have participation, and I guess this is what you're saying, into the decision, sometimes the loudest voice doesn't carry the day, right? And so just how do you explain that?
Just to back up Bill's point, I mean, what we're aiming for here is transparency and faith in the process. Even if someone isn't happy with the results, it didn't go their way. We want everyone to understand that the process was clear and clean and not set up against them. That it was fair and transparent.
Okay, fair enough.
And to add to that, as a P2 practitioner, we want to create environments where, people can come to the table and know why they're coming to the table. And there's a differentiation when people come to the table for legally required input, or when this is just a part of a project that might not have the legal requirement. So you brought up a public hearing, right? We know that in public hearings, the majority's will might not direct the outcome of that decision, right? But we need to inform them of why that is the case, right? And as we're seeing for some of the issues that we're dealing with of the day, in terms of naming and other stuff of those bigger contentious issues, sometimes the minority voices might be the direction that council wants to go, right? But we still have to, because legal requirements, we still have to give them opportunity to voice their concerns. right? So as a practitioner, my job is just to create a safe environment for people to voice their input, but as well inform them of the environment of which their input would live and why we taking certain direction.
I guess my concern was is that they have influence on the decision. What does that mean? So I think I hear what.
Understand your point. The influence is by virtue of having a voice.
Okay.
And then this council would consider all those voices and make a decision. That's influence, whether it's one way or the other, right? Because they've been heard.
Yeah, and just to clarify, there is, so we have advise, which is lower influence, then we have decide, which is the highest influence. So you might come into the room and we want to make sure that they understand that they're only here to advise. So they're not going to have that much influence, right? And that's important for us as an administration to understand, as well as the public to understand as well. That, okay, this is advice. Your influence is not going to be that great because we have fiscal realities. We have the bigger issues at hand that we have to deal with, but we still want to hear what you have to say because it's still valuable and something might come out of there that we have not considered.
Fair enough. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any more questions? One tool that we used once when Kevin Scopel was city manager right at the beginning of the pandemic is we had a Zoom town hall meeting. It's cheap. You can get a amount of people and it's live, right? And they get to talk to council, the mayor, city manager. It's a tool that I think we should revisit. Pretty sure we have the license for because there's two types of Zoom licenses, aren't there? Like this one, and then I can't remember how many people were there, but there was a fair amount of people. It was COVID and everybody was needing some quick information, and it's just a tool that I think that council could probably use. Like you could put council on a virtual Zoom town hall meeting and they could ask us questions about budget. Like that.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You never know how many people, like I do those coffee with Kathy's and I might have 100 people online, but honestly, by a week or two later, there's 1,500 views of it. So Facebook's another, and instead of just, I think Councillor Hughes said it, sometimes you don't want to read, you want to watch a video or interact. Go ahead.
What would be the maximum people on the Zoom? Because I know we had an online.
Like 100 and then you have to get a bigger license to get. a-
Somewhere.
Do you know what our license allows? 500.
500, okay.
Yeah, there you go. Is that, yeah, that's a lot. That's enough. Can't see any more. If you got more, you could do two of them. Okay. All right, anyone want to put a motion for it? On the policy?
What, Ken hasn't got it?
I can do it.
Okay, go ahead.
Not the standing, sorry, I know. Councillor Hughes, I'm having a M&M. The standing committee of the whole recommend to council that the amended public participation policy, say that fast, C-CAO-20 attached to the agenda report dated November 14th, 2023, entitled Public Participation Policy C-CAO-20 be approved.
All right, any comments on that?
You did that on purpose. I think, I mean, we've had great.
Ready to go.
Oh, you were not. We had great discussion, public participation. Okay? We had a lot of good discussion in relation to this, and I appreciate the comments, but a lot of work. Thank you very much. I've gone into it. One of the challenges. I mean, you know, it's something that I think we've struggled with, at least in my two terms, and I'm sure every council struggles with how to get that the public's involvement and engagement. And so I think this is a fantastic policy that you guys have brought forward, and hopefully it does improve our participation.
Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, just Ken, if you didn't have an M&M in one meeting, I'd be disappointed in you. So I'm really glad you got that in. Also, just I think that the integrity or the intention behind this policy is really good. Like it just to try to make sure that we have that involvement. I think the improvements you've made, as I said before, are great. And I think again, the challenge we have is just actually getting the public interested in actually participating and letting them understand why this might be something of interest to them whenever it does come up, instead of opposed just a title saying this is being discussed, because that generally leads to the answer, so what? As opposed to this is why you might care that's being discussed. And then hopefully it might actually get more participation. I know that if something's happening in their neighborhood and they don't like it, there's lots of participation. But outside of that, it's difficult for the public to understand why they'd want to actually take the time out to learn about it and then provide feedback. So I think that's one of our biggest challenges. And so, as I said, if we did some kind of summary or bullet points, it might help. But as far as this policy goes, I think that the integrity of trying to involve the public and to provide that transparency that the public who do participate would like to see is definitely there. So well done.
I just support absolutely engagement with residents. How tough it is to get people out. Everybody's busy. Making it simple that they can become engaged and informed. And then when we have the results to be transparent is absolutely the best way to go forward. Where council represents the residents, so we obviously should be transparent with any of our decisions that involve residents. So this policy will help guide us in that direction. It's has my full support.
Anything to close?
No, nothing at all.
Okay, awesome. Call for the vote. All right. Is that in favor? So that's unanimous. Okay. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Well done. Okay. Okay. Going. We are on the municipal election bylaw. Page 51 of our agenda package. Marta, you're going to do a presentation?
I do not have a PowerPoint, so I'm just going to run through what we did and why we're here. So yes, we're here to talk about the municipal elections bylaw. And we generally do a review of the bylaw usually prior to every general election. So we're a little bit keen this the next it's not until 2025, but we did undertake the exercise. So what we did was we looked at kind of the feedback we had from the last election, and we looked at the Local Authorities Election Act, and we looked at our bylaw, and we have a council policy about votes of electors. So we took a look at all those documents, and we what we heard is what we historically always hear typically is that the voter wait times are long. So in order to address that concern, we're recommending a change that could potentially be used to alleviate that concern in future elections. So the Local Authorities Election Act says that, well, maybe I should back up. So when we have an election, the city is divided into voting subdivisions. So basically areas of the city. And in each voting subdivision, we're allowed to have one voting station in accordance with the provincial statute. We are allowed to change our bylaw to allow us to have more than one voting station per subdivision. We haven't ever had that ability in the past. So we are stuck having only one voting station per subdivision. So we're recommending a change to the bylaw to enable that, which we think could help if when we start setting the voting station locations, which won't happen until 25, once we have some municipal census data and we kind of look at all the build outs in the neighborhoods and we figure out where we think people are going to be and voting, we're going to set locations of voting stations. So, but we would like to have the ability to have more than one voting station per voting subdivision in order to help with the voter wait times. So we have a recommended motion to ask staff to recommend to council to make that change. And so Janice is our 4th and legislative projects coordinator and Cheryl's the deputy city clerk. And I'm technically the returning officer for the election, but we're kind of the team, for the election. So if you have any questions, we're also happy to answer your questions. That's all.
Awesome. Councillor Hughes.
Okay, so I'm just asking the logistics about this, Marta. So if are we planning to subdivide it? Let's say it's poll number 9. Are we planning to say 9A goes here and 9B goes there? Or is it that 9 can go to either? Because my concern is what's to prevent somebody from voting at both locations if their address is listed at both locations?
So the logistics are that we have a list, so everyone is identified when they go to vote. So no one can vote more than once because they put their ballot in and it's counted, and there's not a way because they're checked off the list. Like when we count, we make sure that no one's voted more than once. So no one, I don't think, would be told, you can only go to this voting station and you can only go to this one. I might stand to be corrected, but I think it's to give the option of going to either one in a voting division.
So what's to prevent me in 9A going to both voting stations? Because my name is going to be listed on both locations. So you could cross it off one list, I go to 9B, and I go and do it again, you crossed off that list. And I'm sure that we don't have the time nor the capacity or the interest of actually cross-checking every single list to make sure that the person didn't go to 2.
But you could, sorry to interrupt, but you could go to the advanced voting, you could go to the advanced voting, vote, and then using your kind of thinking, you would then be able to go to 9A or 9B, but you can't, because as soon as you go to advanced, you're crossed off the list. So you wouldn't be able to go to 9A or 9B or go to anyone. You couldn't go to your regular one, but I mean, so if you showed up at 9A and then went across the street to 9B, you're already in the system at 9A and canceled off, and then your 9B would just be rejected. You wouldn't be allowed to vote.
So is that, because I don't know the computers that well, so is that the case, Marta, that once I'm in through once, if I were to go to somewhere again, it would be like, oh no, sorry, you've already had it, the enjoyment of doing this once?
Yeah, I'll let Cheryl jump in terms of the logistics of it, but yes, you're off the list. So we have like advanced votes, we have special ballots, we have institutional votes. Those are all it's kind of the same thing. Like if you had multiple voting stations on the day, you would not be able to vote more than once. Cheryl, do you want to jump in?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And is it, I guess, Cheryl, is it because the computer will kick you out? Or, because like when I go to vote, they just like take my name and they make a slash through it. But I don't know that they've actually assigned, and they assign a number to that, but I don't know if the computer knows that I've had that assignment. So that's why I'm asking, like, how, is there actually a thing where they say, oh, Sheena has already voted, and so then Sheena can't go to another polling station that still has my name uncrossed off? I'm not talking about advanced polling right now, Ken, but the same day of, and say you can't do it.
Yeah, so we haven't done 2 voting stations in a subdivision ever in St. Albert. So I think your point is a really good one, Councillor Hughes. And I think we would put in place checks and balances. So the 2 voting stations for that one subdivision would cross-reference with each other to make sure that that doesn't happen. Maybe you're right, though. Maybe your suggestion, which is 9A, like divided into 9A and 9B, everybody in the north part of that subdivision goes to this one. Like maybe that will be the best way to manage it. We haven't sorted out the logistics of it. But I do think that's, a really good point. So we can take that away. All we're asking, like in terms of the bylaw right now, we're just asking for the ability to have the potential of having more than one voting station per subdivision. We actually don't even know if we'll end up doing that, but we want to be able to have the flexibility to do so if we think that there's going to be a lot of people in a subdivision that would have to wait a long time in one voting station.
To your point, it would be contingent upon the need identified first, and then the logistics, right, to enable everything from parking through to, in particular, potential for voter fraud, as you've indicated. If those things were not airtight, then we wouldn't do it anyway.
Okay. Yeah, I think if you just do a further subdivision and just say 9A, 9B, you don't have to worry about the name being on 2 lists on the same day, and it will save you a lot of administrative hassle. But that's my biggest concern, is just for the public to really feel that the integrity of the election process has no chance of being compromised, because there's already a lot of suspicion in the world about elections in general. So unless we are absolutely like certain, and I don't see how we would be, that, but I could be wrong, I don't have these machines, that once I go in, I can't go across the street and do it over again, because the odds of this being audited are low to none, I would say. So unless we can actually be absolutely confident about it, I would feel more comfortable if just one name is on one list. And that way we don't have to even worry about trying to restore the integrity or doing cross checks or anything of that nature. So that's just all I had on that. So I know that there's like some like Fountain Park, I think they were waiting outside for like an hour is what I heard, and that kind of thing. So obviously that would be a location that would be up for discussion. But you know, I don't know, they could do Paul Kane and Fountain Park side by side. And so if they go to the wrong location, they can just go across the parking lot or something like that. Might work as well. But if they just one name, one list, I think that's the key. And so that's my only hesitancy about voting for this right now, Marta, is that may not occur. So I guess I'm asking for your, because I believe you, is that if we say yes to this, that we will make sure that the integrity of the voting process will be absolutely maintained no matter what.
100%, Councillor Hughes. But if we're able to get software to do it, then we would do it that way. But I think your suggestion is the best. And you can rest assured that that is really of utmost importance to us, that the integrity of the whole process is maintained. So I really thank you for the suggestion, because like I said, we actually haven't done it. So logistically, once we got to the planning stage, we probably would have thought that through and thought, yeah, okay, we have to make sure there's no crossover here. But you're ahead of us.
Okay, perfect.
So thank you.
If I can.
Thank you.
And the Councillor Hughes, the way I envision it is if it's decided that we can do this, we would go out to other communities that actually do this. And we will see how they do it. And there's other agencies that we could contact to find out how exactly we accomplish this. So it probably is exactly what you said, A and B. And then we would divide them. Northridge is a large one. So that's where a lot of our lineups were too. So, and if I can also say something about the lineups, 2021 was a hard one because of COVID. And so what we had was we were 6 feet apart. Everybody had to do a separate form. So it's really not a good one to compare to other elections that we've had in the community. But because there's other logistics with that. But yeah, the integrity of the vote is of importance to us.
Okay, that's my major concern. So I'm glad you guys are also going to be on it. That's it. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So again, good idea coming forward. What I've found in Albert in all the years of watching elections is usually it's a challenge to get people to vote. Voter turnout is usually pretty low, and I've never wanted to vote where it wasn't near empty in most cases. And I mean, maybe it's the timing of the day or I was lucky. So you're saying it was like two particular locations that kind of brought this forward? Like I'm hearing something from Northridge, or where else were the locations?
Well, I would offer that Salvation Army on Giroux and St. Albert Trail.
Right.
Lined up out the door and across the parking lot, and it was very cool.
Alliance Church was way out the park.
So it's maybe the locations that are the problem then, right? You know, like the size of the building or your staff or your parking allowance, because that, you know, I mean, even in the provincial election recently, like in my neighborhood, well, it was all construction and blocked off and people had to park 3 blocks down. And so, I mean, and the staff, did you have trouble staffing at the last election with COVID at all? Or did you have your normal amount of staff there?
Our normal staff, we did have to have actually a little bit of extra. Also, just the hours were a little bit extended. We had to have line up both 6 feet apart. We weren't really watching that as much, but in between each vote, we had to wipe everything down.
Right.
Literally. So it added a lot of extra time. In terms of the locations of the voting stations, we do try to factor all of that into consideration. So the neighborhood, the location, where it's located within the subdivision, parking, access, like how to get there, and availability.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, we do our best when choosing the voting stations. I can't speak to voter turnout in municipalities generally. I think we're not that different from other municipalities in Alberta. Yeah. So I'll just say that we do our best to get the word out and try to do our best to facilitate the process.
Yeah.
And then would there be any, questioning what demographic is in certain neighborhoods? Because I mean, if you have a predominantly senior neighborhood, for example, it'd probably be voting would go along all day. Whereas if it's a younger, everyone's gone to work, they're all coming home at 5 o'clock kind of thing. Do you
We run
that at all?
The voting station hours are the same.
Right, the same, they wouldn't be attended at the same times, right? But
There's rushes, yeah.
yeah. And do you bump staff at specific times or just stays constant?
Or just-
Stays long, all day long. So, yeah, I've just, I know this has come forward for a reason, but I honestly have never seen anything but a dead voting center when I went. So there's got to be some sort of balance found, I would think, but anyhow, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Quit scaring people away.
Falling in, there was nobody there, tables, people sitting around playing cards. I mean, yeah, happy to be
But
there.
we're making a decision based on data.
Yeah.
So let's,
Okay.
when is the census starting? This spring?
In May.
May? That'll be good information. Okay. Any more questions on this? So really our governance role is just to allow you to do this, not to prescribe how you do it.
That's right.
Allow the option.
Allow the option. Okay. All right. Councilor Jolly, you feel like making a motion?
Sure, that
Go ahead.
bylaw 2017, the municipal elections bylaw will be amended by adding the following section where appropriate. The returning officer may designate more than one voting station for each subdivision with the location of the voting stations for the election, and that such amending bylaw be brought to council for approval.
Awesome. Any comments on that?
Just thanks for the team at the city for bringing this forward. It's kind of great to see this, I guess, sooner than later. So it's not a scramble kind of in that year leading up to the election. And I really appreciate the changes to make it easier for people to vote.
Yep.
Yeah, I would hate to, when we struggle for voter turnout, I hate to hear that people went home because they didn't want to stand in the line, so. I see no more comments. I'll call for the vote. That is unanimous, I'm gonna guess. Yeah. Yes, the votes. Okay, is that it for today?
Yawning. Yawn.
Anything read into the record, Madam Mayor? You want to?
Oh, yes, you had something that they said you could read today. Go ahead, Councilor Project.
Let me just bring it up here.
Good job. That's what I said. Good job.
Sorry? Outstanding, thank you.
In our field.
All
right.
RCMP stuff, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Information request, please provide the statistical data for the last 10 years, 2012 to 2022. For soft vacancies by RCMP officers experienced by the St. Albert RCMP detachment. If these vacancies are reported monthly within the detachment, then this data would add depth to the understanding of any recurring trends should they be evident. Additionally, if soft vacancy data is available to St. Albert for other RCMP detachments in the Edmonton region, we may have to place a request for this information to the provincial RCMP office. Please provide that as well so that the St. Albert experience can be accurately compared to others within the Edmonton region.
All right. I think that was the only IR notice motion. Okay. Anyone else have anything new that we don't know about? All right.
You unplug mine.
Before we adjourn,
Can you?
Sean, do you want us to use the same Zoom link to go to the committee of the whole for? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So we'll adjourn. I'll give you guys whatever you need, 5 minutes to move chairs around and then we can get into the budget committee of the whole. So this meeting is adjourned.